I have two motions this evening from the docket of September 20th, 2020. I entertain a motion to approve a portion of Bruce Street, length 244th Street, from Station 0+00 station to 2+44 as a public way, and accept said way and any related drainage, water, or sewage facilities or easements, all shown on a plan and profile entitled Street Acceptance Plan, Road Street, Attleboro, Massachusetts, dated November 29th, 2021, and revised through February 17th, 2022, prepared by Daniel R. Campbell, R.P.E., and Joyce E. Hastings, P.L.S., which plan has been deemed satisfactory to the Superintendent of Public Works.
Second.
Thank you. I don't think I need to add anything. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. From the docket of September 20th, 2022, I entertain a motion to approve the layout of Steeplechase Circle, length of 3,700 feet from station 0+00 to station 37+00 as a public way, and accept said way and any related drainage, water, or sewer facilities or easements, all shown on a plan and profile entitled Street Acceptance Plan of Land, Steeplechase Circle, Bristol County, North District, Attleboro, Massachusetts, dated July 15th, 2022, prepared by Richard R. Reed, Jr., PLS, which plan has been deemed satisfactory to the Superintendent of Public Works.
Second.
Thank you. I don't have any comments. Anyone else have any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I'll call for an adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. 6:46.
It took us so long.
Mr. Vice President, I think my committee meeting is scheduled for 10 minutes of,
I believe that's correct.
so I'll wait till 10 of, right? Thank you.
I was seeing people walking flying across the street. They live there in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I drive by there every day. Because it's a big improvement from what was there.
ahead. I saw them started construction on your friend's site there.
Oh, I know, it's too
They're
bad.
big on the front,
Yeah, unfortunately, because
but I saw the line, yeah.
the guy basically said, you're gonna have to pay me some money to make that cut in there. It's gonna be a line, and she said, I'll send the guy, he's just been, like, I don't know.
So she's, I mean, because you could back the truck in, right? Could you back it in from the street?
Back it in, but then you can't make
You
that.
can't pivot once you're in.
Pivot in, yeah.
Yeah, I walked by there today, but it doesn't look like they're giving her any room.
Nope.
They made a promise and they didn't follow
That's-
through with it either.
Yeah, exactly.
Screw them up, sue. It'll take 2 years to go through court.
Really did.
You wanna play hardball?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a good idea, actually.
Could I,
Get a cease and desist order or something. like that.
Good season.
Yeah.
just put in the file, but
The judge will be very lean towards that, very.
Well, Norfolk Foods has a fence around the building, but they're making them put a fence around their whole
so
parking lot.
he would stop
I asked Kyle about it, and Kyle said it's in a more high-risk area, that's why, the difference. Because even Zahara doesn't have a fence. I didn't know if they have one in the building, because I've never seen.
Like to call public safety the order at 6:50. I'm gonna read the motion, hopefully get a second, and then I'm gonna ask Jeremy to come up and explain that. Seeing he's here, we might as well use him. From the docket of 10/11/22, I entertain a motion to appropriate $413,753 to account 11241-000-578370, citywide reserve for opioid settlement. This amount is equal to the anticipated amount to be received and accounted for in the local receipts budget for FY 2023 funds only.
Second.
Thank you. Jeremy, please.
Thank you, Counselor. Jeremy Stahl, Director of Budget Administration. So we received notification from the state about a opioid settlement anticipated amount. So this is in a settlement from Johnson & Johnson and distributors of opioids in the state of Massachusetts. The funds are anticipated to be received through fiscal year 2039. The communication in front of you now and the business in front of you now is for anticipated fiscal 23 money. So this is an acceleration of the first, I believe, 5 years of payments of Johnson & Johnson payments and the first year of distributor payments, which equal to $400,000 in front of you. The way we've planned to account for this is to increase our local receipt budget by that exact amount and create a reserve within the general fund with that same amount, so it doesn't have any impact on the budget on any other pre-approved aspects of the budget. The Department of Revenue has not issued guidance, and state statute does not allow us to create a special revenue fund to deposit these funds into. We anticipate that the Bureau of Local Accounts in the Department of Revenue will issue guidance as to how to account for these funds outside of the general fund in the future, and at such point we'll come back to you and say, can we move it from the reserve into this special reserve fund? But right now this is the only option available to us. So we are putting it into a reserve because there are restricted uses, which I had placed in my memo, combating the effects of opioid use disorder. Whether that's through personnel programs, shared programming with higher levels of government, what have you. So right now, we're putting in a reserve, and as we identify programs, initiatives, positions on which we want to spend, which are consistent with the settlement, business will be introduced to this body to transfer out of the reserve into an appropriate account. So this amount is equal to what we expect in fiscal '23, and will increase our local receipts budget on our tax recap to the state an equal amount.
Richard?
You confused me when you said that this was a settlement through fiscal year 2039, but this is the first of 5 payments.
So I don't have my memo in front of me. I didn't know I was talking about this tonight, but so the trustee for the settlement and through the settlement terms allowed Johnson & Johnson to advance their first, I believe it's 5 years worth of payments into one year. And we have elected to take that advancement. So we are taking all of the first 5 years of the Johnson & Johnson portion of the settlement within this fiscal year. And then 5 fiscal years from now, the Johnson & Johnson payments will resume. But through fiscal 23 through fiscal 39, the distributor portion, so it's kind of a bifurcated settlement, the distributor and the producer. The distributor portions will continue each additional year. We're only asking for the fiscal 23 ability to increase the appropriation into this reserve and to increase our local receipt in equal amount, because we're hopeful that in future years we'll have guidance and the ability to create a special revenue fund and segregate it more cleanly. But because this is the amount available to us now, we're just asking for the fiscal 23 amount.
Kelly?
Do you know when that guidance might be coming out from the state? No idea. There's
Your
no
guess
clock.
is as good as mine. I like to joke that as a local government official, I am ready and willing to blame the state for anything I can. So yeah, we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Total amount, was it 1.9 million in the total settlements?
Yeah, something like that. I told Councilor Blair about $2 million
Yeah, okay.
earlier. I don't have it in front of me, but it's in that order of magnitude, yes.
Any other questions of my fellow councilors? Okay. Jeremy, I want to thank you.
Of course.
You know, I was lost on this, I admit it.
Well, we've never had, at least in recent memory, a pot of money like this. So yeah, it is uncommon, if not unique.
All right, well, thank you very much for explaining it. I hope my fellow councilors understand it better than me explaining it. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. 3-0 passes. Thank you very much. I adjourn public safety at 6:57.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 7 o'clock. Please rise and join me for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In just a moment, I'm going to ask to suspend the rules, and this is so we can do what we've been doing the last couple of meetings for taking. Motion's not in order quite yet. For taking committee of the whole after the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. So I entertain motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Before we read the notice of the first public hearing, we do have 9. I just want to remind the council that public hearings are for asking clarifying questions. There'll be a time for debate. There'll be a time for opinion. Tonight is a time for clarifying questions. That being said, Madam Clerk, would you please read the notice for the first public hearing?
Yes, Mr. President. Public hearings for October 18th, 2022. The first public hearing, a joint public hearing with the Planning Board to discuss rezoning a portion of Highland Park/Country Club on Rathbridge Willow Drive, Mechanic Street, and Berwick Road from single residence D to general residence.
Okay.
General business, excuse me.
Mr. President, may I be excused?
You may. And let the record show that Council Conti will be accusing himself as he is in a butter. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Welcome, Planning Board. Nice to see you all.
Good evening, Council President, members of the Municipal Council, Planning Board Chairman, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Gary Arasian. I'm the city's Director of Planning and Development, and I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the proposed rezoning. Before I delve into the optics of the rezoning petition, I thought it might be worthwhile maybe to give a brief background of what precipitated the petition to begin with. So the subject land, as you know, if you have the, hopefully you have the rezoning application before you, is Highland Park, formerly known as the Highland Country Club. That's been part of the city's fabric for decades. As you know, it became available for sale in early 2018. Thereafter, Mayor Haru sent out a request for an appropriation of a little over $3 million. I think it was $3.1 million. Thank you. Request for an appropriation of $3.1 million to purchase it, and then in June or July of 2018, the city did purchase it. Thereafter, the mayor appointed an ad hoc advisory committee consisting of about 15 volunteer residents, met for several months, and they were charged by the mayor to come up with a list of, or a menu of, alternative uses. They came up with the list, they finalized it. Among some of those recommendations was for the Highland Park to be a destination point for a cross-country venue for competitions, which we all know is now a reality. That was one of them. The mayor, during the time that we were developing this cross-country venue, met with staff a number of times. Myself, the ED director, the superintendent of Parks and Recreation, the budget director, so that we could consider other recommendations and whether or not how we could pursue those. And one of them was the reuse of the banquet hall. What do we do with the banquet hall? What do we do with the adjacent accessory buildings? Do we knock them down? Do we renovate them, continue to own it, renovate them, rent it out? Do we sell it? So the task of repurposing, if you may, the banquet hall and the accessory structures was given to the ED director, Ms. Fierick, and myself. She then pursued a number of potential interests, and what we found is that there is an interest in a few forms, such as a possible museum, restaurants, banquet facility, an event center, for example, for weddings, and some combination of those. And what I thought was a plus is that although the golf course was no longer in existence and the banquet hall was no longer in existence, the uses that she discovered that there was still interest, or there is interest in the private sector, aligned with the uses that were already there when the banquet hall was viable with the golf course. So given that that interest is still there, it was decided that we ought to sell the banquet hall, and the accessory buildings would be the best path to take. Plus, the city wouldn't have to worry about maintaining the building for long-term, heating it, cooling it, so forth. So then why the rezoning? If we concluded that the uses that the ED director felt are still out there for, like I said, restaurants and so forth, why the rezoning? Well, those uses at the facility, at the site plan, I'll explain what that site plan is in a few minutes, were accessory to the golf course. The golf course is allowed by right in the zoning district, and as uses ancillary to the golf course is a banquet hall and a restaurant. Well, the Highland Country Club no longer exists. The golf course went defunct. And if we wanted to introduce, if you may, similar uses back in that building, we currently couldn't do that because it's not zoned properly for it, because the uses that I mentioned are allowed in a commercial zone. So therefore, this is why we're before the City Council to rezone the property, a portion of it, which I'll go over with you in detail, from residential to commercial, because the uses that we would like to introduce to this are commercial in nature. If the municipal council ultimately votes to rezone this parcel to general business, please understand that that is not the last step in the overall process. One step we've already taken is the Form A process, which was to carve this parcel out from the balance of it. So it's about a 92.5 acre parcel. This represents the green area here, about 5.2, so there's still a balance of about 87 acres. So the first step, after determining that there is merit in pursuing commercial development there, was the Form A process. The next step is the rezoning process. The next step would be the RFP process, request for proposals. I spoke with Ms. Ferrick yesterday, several times I should say, but I should say the last time I spoke with her was yesterday, and inquired the status of that. She had said that she had developed one once before. It needs to be updated. And please understand that the focus of that RFP is going to be very narrow in scope. Council's going to say, the planning board's going to say, well, if we rezone that to commercial, Gary, isn't it true that anything by right or by special permit would be allowed in that zoning district? Yes. But we're going to, because the city owns it, city controls the outcome, we would create an RFP that is very narrow in focus and articulate specifically what the city is looking for an end use. Again, for the sake of emphasis, restaurants, an events venue, a museum, a banquet facility, along those lines. After we do the RFP, we float it. Should we, at the end of that process, and when I say we, the administration, determine that we have a viable proposal or proposals, that still doesn't end the process. What we would then do
is vet it out, decide if there is any viable proposal, and then ultimately, we still have to come back to the municipal council, where the mayor would prompt you for disposition of public property, in which case you then have to hold a public hearing and get to ask all your questions all over again. So I go through that process, not to be presumptuous that you're going to approve it. I go over that process to explain to you that I want you to feel comfortable that should you, at the end of this process with the rezoning, approve the rezoning, that's not the end all. There's at least 3 more steps after that. Having said that, let me describe to you the rezoning. Any questions so far, or you want to say them to the end? That's fine. So, but what better way than I'm going to read this directly off the application that I submitted. Talks about submit assessors maps. All the maps are in your package. The first one, let me just take this apart. Is what I submitted. It says SRD, which is the entire parcel. And you see on the lower end it says Dennis Street and Berwick Road. The next street, the next map shows again the entire land mass, the 92.5 acres, that shows where lot number 1, which is this lot that we carved out, lot 1, in reference to the rest of the real estate. So it shows SRD and it shows GB. The next map that's required by the application is the assessor's map, which is this gray one that you have. The next one is the Form A lot, which is 5.496 acres, which is represented by this plan, which is also required, which is in the packet. And the last handout is the required meets and bounds legal description. Those are the graphics. So that is in response to submission of assessors maps. Please provide, this is section H, a detailed description of the land uses that directly abut the subject property and the land uses in the surrounding area. Now that's referring to the portion of the rezoning area. So I wrote, the land uses that abut the subject property include a former private golf club, AKA Highland Country Club, approximately 6 low-density one-family dwellings. Those are here. The land uses in the surrounding area include a parking lot. That's the parking lot that was built on the Highland Park premises for the construction workers for the high school. That 300 to 350 car parking lot. Located on the former golf course, which was built as part of the high school construction project to provide parking accommodations for the workforce. Then in the general area, you've got approximately another 40 low-density one-family dwellings, the former high school, the new high school, and the Sweet Forest. Please explain the purpose of the proposed rezoning. The purpose of the rezoning is to allow the City of Attleboro to declare the subject property surplus land to ultimately, through the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, promote its availability for sale through the appropriate solicitation process for commercial and business development. I submit to the council and to the planning board that this does not constitute spot zoning, because ultimately the land uses that we want to reintroduce were land uses that were already existing on that property before we even considered doing this. So if we were comfortable for decades with the banquet hall, a restaurant. There were, I know, dozens of weddings and probably other cultural events there. And I reassure you that when we send out that RFP, which you are all welcome to have, that focus will be as narrow as, and the museum I did mention, as the preceding or the pre-existing land uses. I'm a little hesitant to use the word pre-existing because there's a very statutory definition of the word pre-existing, which means grandfather. So just give me a little latitude. I'm not in any way suggesting pre-existing non-conforming status. So I tried to give you context to the rezoning without just talking about the optics of the zoning, so you understand that there was substantial background that dates back at least since the time we purchased the property as to where we are right now. During my preparation for tonight's public hearing, I did hear some chatter. And I want to talk about that chatter so that I come with full closure with the application. A couple of questions were, Gary, how does this in any way, if it does, interfere with the cross-country venue? My knee-jerk reaction was that it won't, that it doesn't. There isn't any constructed track there, but I do understand there is one that's laid out, albeit on grass. But that was my reaction to it. I then called upon the expert, Mr. Derek Corsi, Superintendent of Parks and Forestry. And he's here tonight. He's here tonight. I don't know if he's going to speak, but I asked him for confirmation of that, and he asserted that that is correct. You're more than welcome, of course, to ask him the question, but I want to reassure you that the geometry of this lot that we created, and I'll go over that if you'd like me to go over the sides with you, does not in any way conflict with the cross-country layout or the track venue.
Gary, can I ask a question?
Of course you may.
What about parking for those events?
Does not affect those at all.
So they'll still be able to park up in the parking lot where they are?
This is seamlessly standalone without any impact to anything else, Councilor Delissio.
Thank you.
The other optic that I'm aware of is the feasibility study for the Council on Aging. And shame on me if I don't bring that up to talk to you about that. So I understand that there is a needs assessment / feasibility on the way. I understand that it could be ready by summer of 2023. One of the questions that was asked of me is, for whatever reason, if the municipal council rezoned this property to GB, and for whatever reason, the economic development approach does not materialize, and one of the conclusions from the feasibility study, and I understand the mayor is not warm to the idea of having the COA here, he made that abundantly clear, but he kept the foot in the door. And what he said to me was, Gary, in the event it turns out that this site, not the overall site, this site, turns out to be on the short list, then we would consider it. Well, the question was, if you rezone it, and whether or not the economic development component materializes, what does that do if we then want to consider this as a possible site for the COA if you rezone it? Well, the answer to you is that municipal buildings are allowed by right in any resident, in any zoning district throughout the city. So if you were to rezone this to single residence, industrial business park, planned highway business TOD, you get the idea, a municipal building is allowed by right. So there would not be an obligation for you to rezone. And more importantly, is that it would not preclude, if it ever comes to the manifestation of that feasibility study that points to this site potentially being a good site for the Council on Aging. So if it points to that, then we could do it there without having to rezone anything back. The last piece I want to share with you is, as we developed this site plan, Derek and I and Catherine really took a jaundice eye on how can we come up with the lot, because the only lot line that exists at the time, before the Form A, was here, just this. We came up with this. So we had to have a logic to coming up with that. I think it optimizes the proposal such that there's enough elbow room for any of those venues to work without necessarily providing any excess real estate. This line here, I had a little difficulty, right around here. And where I had a little difficulty is because you have an outbuilding here. There's an 8-foot setback. In this zoning district, there's an 8-foot setback. The minimum, by creating this would be a sideline. The setback would be 15 feet. That only shows 8 feet. What I didn't want to do is presume that either we knock that building down, move the building, or take a portion of it off so that it's 15 feet. So I took it upon myself after speaking with the mayor that I then filed a variance application with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and there's a public hearing scheduled on Thursday, October 27th at 6:30 here at the City Council chambers to take into consideration that 7-foot variance. So that in the event we do sell it, that we're not selling anything with any defect, that with the variance, presuming it would be granted, and the location of that line really optimizes the location between this accessory building and the toe of the slope, because here it slopes down. So we put this line not at the top of the slope, it's at the bottom of the slope, but still gives us a little cushion here between the walkway, which is on the municipal side. Right now, it's on both sides, I know that. I just mean if we were to sell it. And ultimately, if we were to sell it, gives us a little buffer. So Derek and I kept playing with this line here, and we think we came up with a sweet spot right here, which creates that 8-foot setback, for which I would accommodate that, hopefully, should I convince the zoning board for a variance of 7 feet. That's my presentation.
Councilor Blair, we've got a lot, so we'll go around. Councilor Blair, Councilor DeSimone, Councilor Bennett, Councilor Angelo, Councilor Dolan, Councilor Davis.
Gary, that building you're talking about that's close to the line, I picture that as one of the storage sheds for the golf carts.
Yeah, they're all accessory buildings. What's actually in it, Councilor? I think I've seen it inside. I really don't know off the top of my head. Maybe Derek would have a better idea.
Okay, but it's not the pro shop, if I remember
No, no.
correctly.
Pro shop's here. One of these buildings here.
Those were very cheap buildings when they were put up. If I remember correctly, they're metal buildings.
I don't know if they were cheap or what. I don't know. If you say so.
I belonged there when
All right.
they were put up. They were strictly storage sheds for the carts, I believe. So,
That's definitely not the pro building.
you know, if they had to go, I'm sure if you sold it, that wouldn't interfere with somebody buying it.
Okay.
Okay, just for clarification.
Okay.
Councilor DeSimone.
Thank you, President Delacio. Gary, thanks for coming and you're sharing your expertise. 2 quick questions. Number 1, is there any way by which Lot 1 could be further divided into 2 parcels? And my second question is, as proposed, doesn't it, access would then become private to the park? So where would public access be?
Good question. So ultimately, the answer is yes. Can one petition the city to subdivide that? Absolutely. They'd have to come before the planning board. So we can't preclude somebody from filing an application. Whether or not it gets approved is another story. The second note I'm glad you asked, you're talking about this right here.
Yeah.
I had the engineer on the site plan write access easement to be retained by the city of Attleboro, so that it would be shared. So if you come in
Got it,
from here,
okay.
the city, even though if we sell this, would retain an easement so that we could travel over this. I mean, here would be city, this would be city, all this already would be city if we sold it, but this, we would retain an easement.
If I may, one follow-up question. In terms of just a roadway, not a parking area, is that
Roadway,
accurate?
correct.
Roadway.
Yeah,
okay.
that's just where you couldn't park there. I mean, I suppose nothing stops anybody from parking there, but it's not really, you know, if you wanted to pull your truck over or something, but it's really not a parking lot.
Okay.
Yeah, just for roadway access.
Thank you, thank you.
That's it. Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delacio. You basically answered my question with Councilor DeSimone. So with the easement, we would be sharing that
Yes.
entrance to go in with
Yes.
whoever bought that,
Yes.
and that feels the city feels that that would be sufficient for both parties?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Bennett.
Thank you. If the feasibility study for the COA does point to this as a good and viable location, what happens if the RFP has already gone out, it's gone through that vetting process, and an option has been selected that might go against the COA being built
Yeah,
there?
so it's really a matter of timing. So what are we in? We're in pretty much at the end of October now. So Catherine needs to prepare the proposal. We float it. We give a month and a half, 2 months for a response. Feasibility study's continuing. So what are we in to say? January, February, March. We review them April, May, and I think by the time the feasibility study's on, we could just hold off on making a selection, just out of fairness to see if this is on the short list, and if it is, again, we're in control. We don't have to sell it. So there's always, what's the word I'm looking for? A clawback? I don't know if that's the right term, but it's always at the city's discretion whether or not to move forward with making a selection. Okay, so
Thank you.
we don't have to make a decision ahead of time simply because the proposals came in and we have one in hand. Fine, we have one in hand.
Thank you. If I might, I have one just follow-up question. You had mentioned something about parking. I understand from my time, going through this area, the parking lot that's currently there sort of services that building.
Yes, right.
And it's within that footprint. Where would there be parking then for the track and cross-country activities and events, should this go forward?
The other 87.
So it would need to be built?
Pardon me?
It would need to be built then? New parking would need to be built?
Yeah.
So I want to defer to Derek on that because I really am not familiar with the logistics of the track. The questions that were posed to me, Councilor Bennett, was, does this interfere with the track itself or the path that they run? And the answer is no. I'm really not familiar with the parking arrangements, but that parking lot would go with that banquet, and then we would have to make accommodations if need be. So I will tell you that Mayor Haru is looking to, there's this discussion out there that the parking lot that was built for the high school, the 300, the 350, that's considered temporary. And I always made it a point, no, it's not temporary. A parking lot is a parking lot is a parking lot until you decide to take it out. So there's no such thing to me that there's a parking lot that's temporary for 2 weeks. You have to design it for a parking lot, so it's permanent to me. The mayor's looking for, and it's hard, after what I told you, is to make that permanent, if you may, is not to take it out. So whether that is upgraded and left there, that would be the parking lot. But again, I don't know if that was used, Councilor Bennett. I don't know if this back area is. I don't know if they park on the grass right now. So I would kindly defer that question to Mr. Corsi.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Dolan.
My questions were answered already.
Vice President Cobus.
Thank you, President Delicio. Gary, thank you for coming out. Can you describe to us some of the types of businesses that are allowed in a lot of this size in general business?
Sure. So some, I'm going to give you some that are by right and some that are by special permit.
If you could.
Okay. Just to give you a flavor without necessarily going over.
Trying to put you on the spot there. Thank you.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. By special permit, mixed residential business use, whereby, let's see, whereby all dwelling units are above the first floor or allowed by special permit. That's a residential use. That would be GB. Residential cluster dwellings primarily for the elderly and handicapped. Community facilities. Religious institution. Secular institutions. Schools. Well, I want to say family daycare and group daycare But those are protected under the Dover Amendment. Those could go anywhere anyway, so our zoning ordinance follows the Dover Amendment. So I'm not going to say we particularly pointed those out as permitted by right. The state requires those by right. I'm just trying to line these up. You know what? Let me use this. It's a little easier. Wildlife sanctuary and trails. As I said earlier, municipal buildings and recreational facilities. But let me get down to some other ones that I think you wanted to get to, like veterinary hospital. A healthcare facility as defined by our zoning ordinance. That's by special permit. A hospital or a nursing home.
Vice President Cobus.
Kennel, commercial kennel.
Yeah, and Gary,
Gasoline stations by special permit, I think. So,
Okay.
yeah, so there are those that could have it in, but again, the narrowness of the RFP would preclude one from even making that proposal, because we would just dismiss it.
okay. But let's take, for example, a gas station.
Yeah.
If there were to be a gas station there, would that have a negative impact on, say, the surrounding neighbors around
Yeah.
that property? Yes.
I would think so, sure.
Okay. And I know you had mentioned that, this isn't final, this isn't our last bite at the apple, and down the road there would be an additional request to sell the land or whatever. But correct me if I'm wrong, if this is rezoned, and say we sell it and somebody buys it, a business buys it, there's nothing stopping them from selling it down the road 10, 15 years down the road in putting a gas station
No,
there.
actually,
Once we rezone it, it's
No, they
it's
are
over,
handcuffed,
correct?
because they have to go by what that proposal is. That's why we select it. So somebody can't come in and say, let's say we're going to do a wedding venue, a banquet hall / wedding venue, or a prom venue, whatever the case is, and 2 restaurants. That's what they have to build. So even if they were to sell it to the next entity, they're bound by that agreement. So you can't just come in, because then there's collusion, if you may. You come in, honor the tenants of that RFP, and then turn around, flip it to someone else, and because someone else owns it, so I get to do whatever I want. They're bound by that agreement of what comes of the RFP. So an RFP solicits the proposals. We vet out the proposals, then you enter into a contract that this is the way you're going to develop that as a result of the proposal. That's bound, and we would write it so that it's the recipient of the approval, already successor in title. I'm oversimplifying it, but that would be the language, so that they're locked in no matter any number of people that might be the subsequent owner of that.
Okay, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
And again, by rezoning this, all the council really doing, not to minimize it, to say after all that, Gary, now you're just kind of minimizing, it just really allows Catherine and I to continue with our work till we get to the point where, I forgot which councilor asked, I think it was Bennett, well, what happens if you get to a critical point, where this project bumps up against, if the Council on Aging happens to be one of the final? Well, again, this is the city of Attleboro. We're in control of our destiny with that. So again, it allows us to continue our work as your planner and your economic development person to do what we do, is to market the city, try to get the optimum use of that, and then ultimately the decision rests with the mayor, and then with you if you choose to sell the property, if we get to that point. I like to say when we get to that point, but if we get to that point.
Council Holmes.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Thank you for coming in. We have a real unique opportunity here. I was wondering if you have any examples of other property that this has happened in the city with at all, where we have had a significant amount of land and maybe kind of what happened.
Sure, whether we've had significant, Councilor Holmes, I gotta tell you, I don't want you to shoot off the top of my head. I can't recall, but I will be glad that during my whole tenure of 36 years, I'm sure we've come across this before. Let me look it up, and I'll be happy to present that. Well, not present, I'll just forward that to Virginia. I just can't recall off the top of my head, but I have to think we have.
Okay. And then why did you decide the 5 acres? Or Where did that come from?
Yeah, again, given again, it has to do with where the building's located. These are spread out over here. These are spread out down here. This is an existing property line, okay? Without this still exists. This is what separates Highland Park from the residents. This is Berwick Road, so that's kind of a given. So the line that we came up with is really this here. And I'm gonna walk you through this. I'm gonna go counterclockwise, right? So again, this is all given, because that's the street, and this is the abutters. So I'm gonna go counterclockwise. We had to come to some point over here, because this is the parking lot. We want this parking lot to be sold with this. Okay, so we had to come back this far. So this is an actual edge. That's the edge of the parking lot. So when we came up here, and how can we get to this walkway here and not pick up these properties, these buildings? So we had to find a location that would be, without having too many jobs in the line, straight lines. And as we drew a straight line here, because it's behind the parking lot here, we had to go on a diagonal to pick up the location over here. If you go straight over here, these are conforming, but that's where we get the 8 feet. But now, once we're here, we didn't want to put this on the other side of the walkway because Derek wanted this on the city side. So we had to find a sweet spot between this corner, that walkway, and this line represents the toe of the slope. It slopes down. So that's where we picked this line up here. Go straight across here, again, maintaining setback and avoiding taking up the walkway, so we wanted it below the walkway. Straight over here. Now, once we got here, this is where the roadway that would stay with the city intersects with where we would grant an easement for the owner, the prospective subsequent owner that's gonna own this. And there's an intersection here. So we had to work around that, and then we just kind of brought it back over here. So we essentially backed into 5.496 plus or minus acres. It wasn't a round number, it wasn't some preconceived geometry. We backed into it. And it's the optimum geometry.
Okay.
It doesn't handcuff the developer or the prospective owner, and it gives the city what we're looking to maintain along with the easement.
Okay, thank you. And so is this process, this is typically the first step of the process?
No, it's a little more than the first. As I said, we did the format. That's already been approved by the planning board. I'm gonna say earlier this year, February, March. So that was already approved. This is the next leg of that process, and there's 3 more, I would say.
Has there been any thought about the bigger picture of what would end up being around this building, or what we would be doing with this property?
That Counselor, I'm going to defer to the mayor, because as I said at the beginning of my presentation, he appointed a 15-member committee. I have a list from 2019 that group created, and it's really at the mayor's, the department heads are really at the mayor's whim in terms of what he wants to pursue, and we would execute that. So some of us are looking into the Council on Aging. Catherine and I are looking at the economic development aspect of this. Derek was pursuing the cross-country. So it's really at the mayor, and I haven't been authorized by the mayor to talk about what other uses would be here. Actually, the other one, if you may, but it doesn't really interfere with this one, if you may. He's already presented his request for the pavilion, if you may. So that's another alternative. But again, that's something he's pursuing and hasn't authorized me to speak about. But because it's already been made public, I feel comfortable talking about it. So that would be another one.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Vice President Corbis, then we'll go to Councilor Bennett and Councilor Blair.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. One is this rezoning a mandatory step for us, or have alternatives been considered where we could say we wanted a beer garden or something, or some sort of restaurant there? could we lease the property and allow an exception there, or is this sort of a mandatory step?
Well, I don't understand, you said, can we lease it and can we do an exemption? I'm not sure what you...
Do we have alternatives from this rezoning where we could accomplish a similar end result?
Well, I have to say yes, but I'd have to understand, what those alternatives are for me to give you a specific. I can't categorically tell you, this is it and that's it, right? That would be, for your planning director to give you a direction like that, that's pretty close-minded. So I have to say yes, but again, we'd have to determine what other, again, let me back up and say, we're pursuing this alternative because the ED director sensed, however she went through prospective potential users, that there is a market for the items that I've talked about. Because of that, this is the avenue we're taking. So, I mean, you mentioned a brew house, that's, yeah, that would be allowed. But the question now is, do we want that to be part of the RFP?
Okay. And then the second question, do we have...
So was I clear on the first one? So I want to say, of course there are, but...
Alternatives, yep.
Okay, all right.
Got it. And then the second question is just, do we have a legal opinion from the solicitor about this not being spot rezoning?
No, I didn't ask for one. I'm very comfortable offering you my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bennett.
Again, following my logic, that the uses that we would pursue in the RFP align themselves with the uses that were there when the golf course was present and active.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Bennett.
Thank you. To Councilor Holmes' point, without a sort of a holistic plan in place as to how the surrounding areas would be used, how would, for example, a private use be prioritized against a potential conflicting use by the city? Let's say a development of a performing arts pavilion is done right next door to where this private use may be, and this could be, for example, a banquet facility where there's weddings happening or events happening. How would we deconflict those uses going forward?
So, Council, if we were talking about a 10-acre parcel, valid point, we're talking about 100 acres. If we were to, whether this administration or any administration, contemplating every conceivable potential use on 100 acres, we would never do anything. We would never, you'd be gun shy, you'd never want to do anything. So when you're comfortable with the first step, then what you do with the next step is make sure that there is harmony with the next step and with the third step. And I guess to follow your logic to its categorical imperative, at some point, the last use is probably going to be the most difficult use to back into. You follow? Because if we were to do that with everyone well, this might be a conflict that we never move forward. Yeah, I mean, you'd be in paralysis. So for that reason, we're very confident that this first step, particularly because it aligns itself with what was there previously, we're very comfortable with that. And we're also keeping an eye open. Like I said, I don't want to dilute the mayor's position on the Council on Aging here. I understand that. But again, he said, if ultimately, Gary, that turns out to be one on the short list, well, we're going to have to consider it. So he never closed the door. The guy kept his foot in the doorway. So I think we're in good position right now to move forward with this, particularly, again, coming full circle. You're still going to get another bite at the apple at the time of the disposition.
Thank you.
You will get to see the RFP. It's public record to see what it says. So.
Yep. Councilor Blair.
This is a quick one for Derek, or you can answer it. This doesn't, excuse me, encompass the maintenance building that Derek uses down there.
You're going to have fast, Derek.
Well, get him up here.
Well, once Gary's done, we'll
Okay.
go through the process. Any additional questions for the city planner? Planning board? No? All right. Gary, thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? I got a feeling Derek Corsi might want to come up. I don't know. Let's call it intuition.
I'll stay behind in case you have any other questions, okay?
Thank you, Gary.
Can I continue?
How's it going? Derek Corsi, Superintendent of Parks. Any questions regarding the track?
Councilor Blair.
Just your maintenance building down there,
Yep.
is that off this property?
No, that is encompassed in the property. We're not currently using that. We're just using it for some off-site storage, but we're not using it for day-to-day operation.
Okay, When
in
I look-
preparation for something like
When
this.
I looked at the plan, I says, I think that's in there.
It is in there. Good eye.
Okay. Thank you.
Derek, do you have anything you want to add to this, or?
Well, I just want to reiterate that when we went through with this planning, it does not interfere with, the majority of the use of the park where people are using now, or the cross-country track. I think one of the key components to making this a reality is utilizing the construction parking lot, which is currently there, 300 or so spaces, and, eventually making that the entrance to Highland Park as opposed to what we're utilizing right now. It actually has a nice natural connection to the Sweet Forest right across the street, ties into Capron Park. We could eventually do a little path through the Sweet Forest and kind of create a natural connection between all of these parks, which is something that I think would be nice. As far as the parking goes, the construction lot has more than enough spaces than we currently have now. So if that was made available as a parking lot, it would make all the sense in the world and would cover all our needs.
Council Bennett?
Thank you. On that point regarding the what I understood to be temporary parking for the construction, what would need to be done to make that permanent parking?
That would be a Gary question.
You may.
Thank you.
Actually, nothing.
Okay,
Actually, nothing.
All right.
that was good.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Superintendent Corsi? Council Holmes?
Well, I don't think it would be nothing. I mean, I think we have to get lighting, we'd have to get security. I mean, there would have to be some involvement in terms of making this more, but that concludes my comments.
So Superintendent, quick question for you. So we're talking about the parking lot over on Rathbury Willard.
Correct, yeah.
In full disclosure, my son's on the Attleboro High School cross-country team, so I'm
Yep.
familiar with the meets and some of the invitationals. I know there's college meets. I mean,
Yep.
wonderful venue for those meets. But I've seen the parking, even, the parking's tough.
Yeah, well,
utilizing that
I
lot
think-
and even the lots up to the buildings we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think if the parking lot were to be utilized where, the construction zone is, we would have the ability to use the high school parking lot, which is across the street, and that would be a great overflow parking solution. Right now, we're kind of juggled all over. We'll park next to the building, we'll park in the driving range, and when we get permission, we'll use the construction parking lot. But I think having everything in that general location, if we needed overflow, would be a much simpler solution.
Thank you. Additional questions? All right, Superintendent Corsi, thank you.
Big East Tournament, Halloween weekend at Highland Park, so it's gonna be
yeah?
a big deal. So if you guys wanna stop by and check it out, it'd be great.
There you go.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. A little marketing too on the way out. Anyone else to speak in favor?
Hi, Budget Director Jeremy Stoll. I'll be brief, but I want to reiterate Vice President Kobus's point. This is not the last bite at the apple for this piece of property. The plans to be narrow in the RFP, and there'll be business to the municipal council to surplus this property at the appropriate time. So this rezoning doesn't have an immediate trigger for anything. And you are also, of course, welcome to see the RFP, but the administration will craft it. There's a COA feasibility study ongoing right now, and in the last 2 years, as my dual role as capital projects administrator, I'm also administering that project. And the firm selected to do the feasibility study by the Municipal Building Commission, they've been given a non-exhaustive list of roughly 10 sites on which Council on Aging may possibly be cited. That was largely derived from the list that was presented to you by Chief Assessor Julie Hobson as city-owned parcels of greater than an acre with planning and conservation agents' comments as to its feasibility. So the Highland Clubhouse is on this list, this non-exhaustive list, but it's the administration's initial preference to not prioritize this facility. It's on the list because it has been of interest to a number of members of the Council on Aging Board and the Council on Aging itself, so it felt right to include it. But through our experience, a rehabilitation of an existing facility typically is more expensive compared to a similarly apportioned facility, which is a new build. So while not immediately prioritized, it is being considered. But rezoning tonight, or the result of tonight's hearing and the resultant vote, does not preclude a council on aging being placed there. And as City Planner Gary Ration had said, there are additional steps to be taken towards that. And that government use is afforded by right in any zone. Because I came up, the parking lot at Highland, it is the administration's preference. While it is a permanent parking lot by design, it is a temporary parking lot by permit. So it's the administration's preference to have that become a permanent parking lot, whether in its current condition or a truncated version that serves many needs well. Is a discussion to be had at a later point, but because it came up tonight, I wanted to talk about it. And yes, when we have larger cross-country meets, like the Big East tournament at the end of October, we utilize the lot. But at this point, within the AHS construction project, there's a lot of material being stored. There's a lot of Connex boxes and lights and everything. So it's not an automatic thing for us to be able to use the lot, but we're sensitive to the project's needs, and they have been accommodating towards ours. So we're making it work.
Any question? Jeremy, thanks for coming down. So the question I have, and we've talked about it a couple times tonight, the COA feasibility study. I understand about what you were talking about in terms of the preference and still having it on the list, but I guess why are we bringing this down now? It seems like there's a couple different parts that, maybe we should wait for them to move in conjunction before we have this conversation. I was curious as to where you felt on that.
Yeah,
What you felt on that.
I think because it's so iterative and because things take a long time sometimes, that this first step was important for us to start now. I know Planner Gary Ration and Economic Development Director Catherine Fierick have been working on this for a long time with both the administration, myself, Derek, and some others. So this is a necessary and not sufficient step for us to go forward with the eventual disposition through an RFP process. And if we didn't start now, I was afraid about how long it would take eventually. I will say, I meant to say this earlier, the architecture firm which is doing the Council on Aging feasibility study is presenting at the COA board in November on some kind of rough fitting of programming needs onto potential sites, and it's all very preliminary based upon our timeline. But at that point, we'll know a little bit more, and I'll invite you all to participate, and we'll inform you all. But for me, it's, we needed to take the first step at some point, and if we don't end up disposing the property through the surplus property process, then that's a fine outcome too, if Council on Aging is the best option.
Thank you. Council Holmes.
Thank you. Just to President Delicio's point, and I remember Council DeSimone saying sometimes it feels like we're throwing darts in the dark. Every month there's kind of a new project that's being presented to us, and sometimes it just feels very fragmented, and it does. So I don't know if that concludes my comments. I don't really have a question.
I will say there's lots of projects going on, but they're, at least on the, from my perspective, are thoughtful and targeted. And if we can do a better job communicating that, we'll talk about that. But I don't think it starts in the dark, no.
So to that point, Jeremy, if there is a way, and the question would be, are you able to get us a list of some of these projects, what they are? So, and I think it's just probably a little bit of a missing communication, but this way here, if we had a list, we would have a better understanding of some of the things that could be coming down the pipe.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. A list of
Well, you
what
said
projects?
that-
I want to make sure I understand your question.
Well, I'm going off your last point, Jeremy. Your last point of saying, we have projects. What are the projects? If we could have better line of sight to not just Highland, but across the city, I think it would help us make more informed decisions. Anything pertaining to Highland, certainly in this situation, would be helpful. But where you said that, it could be a miscommunication, let's see if it is, and if there are reports or any sort of plan, lists that have these projects, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah,
Based on what you offered to the council just a few months ago.
certainly. I don't know that there's a list itself, but I will
Thank you.
make every effort.
Appreciate it. Additional questions? Okay, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Anybody else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against?
Good evening, I'm Richard Conti, I live at 100 Berwick Road in Attleboro. I'm in a butter, and that's why I'm addressing you today. Do we have a problem with that?
Yep.
I'm questioning I'm questioning this where you are sitting on the council even though you're not voting. I think it could present a conflict of interest. I would feel better, Mr. Conti, in this situation, if you could send your remarks in.
Thank you for the ruling, and I will take a seat.
I appreciate that, thank you. And as a matter of fact, Counselor, I believe you need to be out of the chambers altogether. Sorry about that. Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak against?
President Delicio, councilors. I'm Joe Feroce. I live at Sandcastle Manufactured Home Park in South Attleboro, and I'm also the board chair of the Council on Aging. So you've already heard about the potential of the Council on Aging possibly moving to that site, and thanks, Gary, for bringing that up. And as Jeremy mentioned, it's in the very early stages of the feasibility study. There are 10 proposed sites, and one of the first phases of the study is going to be to begin analyzing each of those 10 sites. I didn't bring the list with me, but I can assure you that I think half of them are not even within the realm of possibility. And I think that the board has made a couple of visits to that site, and I think that Highland Park has got to be one of the potential favored sites. Jeremy thinks there might be others that are better, but not sure what that might be. And as I said, it's very early in the study. So my request would be to defer your vote until that study has a bit, let it play out over the next few months. It will proceed, even though Melissa has resigned, but the study will proceed. The site selections part of it is imminent to be started, and then there's a huge questionnaire they've sent that Melissa is already working on, so that part will get done. So we don't anticipate any slowdown in that study. And we do think that, Jeremy mentioned, the architects are going to come to our November board meeting to do an update. We might have a better feel by then. Hopefully by then they've had a chance to look at some of the sites and get started in that phase. But I'm just going to request that the vote be postponed until we have more information.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Feroce? Joe, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have anyone else to speak against?
Good evening, Mr. President, fellow council members, members of the planning board. My name is Michael McGann. I'm a attorney and partner in the law firm of Coogan Smith here in Attleboro. Excuse me. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of my clients who reside at 92 Westgate Road, Frank and Jennifer Scioli. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight, but I am representing them, and they live at the end of, for those of you who don't know where that address is, at the end of the driving range at Highland. They abut that property. So they are immediately adjacent and abut the driving range to the property. They look at Dennis Street, they look Mechanic Street are opposed to that. High School Street, a lot of them looked at, and Berwick Road, some of those. That's all residential. And in fact, the city, they have the same question. You historically taken the position that they want to rezone properties that from commercial into residential in that area. So the council doesn't look any further than rezoning the condominiums right in the corner that are right across from the country club. Those were at one time clear float. They're now residential properties. Right adjacent to that, those were that was Ron Cap. That's residential property. You go down another little further. You had that with the big brick building where they had the unemployment agency. That's all condominiums. Go across the street, condominiums. Everywhere in that area is residential. You have to ask yourself, as my client has, why not use the property for residential? And you don't have to do this. That's question one. Question two, why the so-called Texas two-step? Why isn't the city coming to you saying, here is what we're going to use the property for? Not, we want to rezone it for multiple reasons. We want to rezone it from residential to general business. They're asking you to make a decision about what they will use that property for. Why not, like any other applicant who comes before the council, has to show you what we have. Here's our plan, here's the project, here's how it's going to be built. You can then know all of the facts. You don't have to guess. Now, I don't doubt the good faith of the city, and particularly Mr. Regent, who I've known for many, many years. But times change, circumstances change. What happens today may not be what they want to have happen tomorrow. They may have, in the best of good intentions, to put that out to bid for various things, but the economy can change very quickly. We all know that. Things could get worse. What's it going to be used for? Now, he's giving you some broad-based terms about a banquet facility, about a museum, an event center, restaurants. Is that singular? Is that plural? Is that more than one use? 5 acres is a lot of property. You don't know that. There's nothing before the board to make that determination. Why would you put yourself in that situation where you vote to change the zoning when you don't have elementary questions answered that you logically want have answered? Now, you asked Mr. DeRazian the types of things that were used in a general business. He answered some of them. I believe there are others, and I could stand corrected. And I know Mr. Lewis for many, many years as a fellow colleague. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe some of the following things could be used if you rezone this property in that area, okay? You could have a retail establishment, principally convenience goods, for food, drugs, and proprietary goods. That to me is like a 7-Eleven, something like that. I believe that's permitted. You could have a retail establishment selling general merchandise, eating and drinking places. You could have a brewery, craft brewery, brew pub, winery. You could have establishments selling automobiles, trucks, and boats. You could have secondhand motor vehicle sales there. You could have a bus, taxi, or rail terminal maintenance facility operate there if you change that zoning. Now, the city would say to you, well, we will come back with the RFP and you'll know. Well, why aren't they doing that now? How can I, in representing a client, how can a client and other members of the public tell you where they stand on this if they don't know the project that's being submitted? Isn't that pretty fundamental, pretty logical? Those are the type of questions that my client has, and that's why they're here before you saying, I'm opposed until I know what's going to be there. Now, I'm not telling you that my client wouldn't agree to something. In fact, if it was exactly what Highland was, they would agree with that. But what if we don't know? And Mr. Rajan said, well, a successor that comes in there will have to be bound by the same terms and conditions. From a legal standpoint, I'm not so sure about that. I leave that to the city solicitor to determine. But if that's the case, I would suggest to you, if you ever get to that point, tell them to put it into a deed restriction. Mr. Lewis can tell you what that's all about. He knows it better than I do. But that says you cannot do A, B, C, D, and E. couple other points I'd like to make if I could. I suggest to you that it is vastly premature to be requesting the relief that's being requested by the city right now, number one. Number two, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Rajan that this is not spot zoning. The city has attorneys that are available. They can make their own determination legally. But you look at everything in that area, from Dennis Street to Berwick to Rathbun Willard to Mechanic Street, the properties up to where my clients live. You go up beyond the high school, the old high school, and that little development in there. It is surrounded by properties, residential. Why the need to change it? I don't think that's been answered. I don't think that's been answered. Mr. Rajan said this is the optimum use. I'd say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe in his eyes, in the city's eyes, it's optimum use. From what my client knows about the application, it's not the optimum use. Continued residential use is the optimum use. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to answer any questions you have.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Mr. McGann, thank you.
Hello, respect to all.
Good evening. And just your address?
Leonel Bermudez,
Just your address, please.
So
46 Berwick Road.
so like you said, my father said, we are at 46 Berwick Road, and we don't feel comfortable with this idea. Our backyard is actually Highland Park. It was recently constructed, I believe, in 2000.
3-4 years ago.
2018, I was going to say. I don't want to say anything wrong, but yes. And I have a little sister at home who, in the summer, she's outside. It's so hard to get her indoors. And we feel safe with her outside because the only people who use that trail are runners, are high school students. So she's actually going to be starting high school soon. So for that possibility of, her being outside and like doing track and just, having that access to be removed, we don't feel comfortable with it. And we do agree with what the previous person did say.
In general, I back up what my daughter says, and the reason I let her speak is because she speaks English. So I'm trying. So
you're doing great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Very good.
Do we have Council Reynolds?
So can you tell me how long you've lived up that area on Berwick?
So we actually were very blessed to buy the house. We actually got to pick all the inside details. We bought it, we spoke with the constructor, Christopher Colby.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw it from start to finish.
Okay, and so you've been at the area how long? When did you move up there?
The house, I believe we moved right before the pandemic.
So you've been there a few years.
Yes.
Do you know any of your neighbors on that area similar to what Mr. Attorney McGann was saying?
Yes,
Do you know
yes,
them
we
too?
do. Jackson and Alana, they live at the house right in front.
Right in front of you.
Right in front of us.
And so do you feel, is your thought process that it should also remain as it is or remain similar to residential and not bring in, change it to general business, basically?
I think it should be residential.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you both for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Anybody else to speak against? Please make your way to the podium.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. I'm Joseph Ordog. I live at 35 Colts Way here in Attleboro. I looked at the aggregated ideas presented to the Highland Country Club Future Use Committee before coming here tonight. And they voted on quite a number of ideas, and their positive votes were for allowing fireworks, allowing bocce, creating a 9-hole disc golf, create a community garden, a cross-country course, a playground for kids, an area for picnic tables, barbecue pits, for family functions, and to create biking and biking trails and walking trails for summer use with snowshoeing and cross-country skiing in the winter. Nowhere, well, I'm sorry, 14th on their list was that the country clubhouse could become a banquet facility privately run. And I wonder how 5 acres is necessary for a banquet facility, even if you develop an area to take pictures for a wedding party or a graduation event. Rejected ideas by the task force was to have the clubhouse leased, to allow the YMCA to lease the land, to create a dog park, to create a golf course and driving range, whether privately leased or publicly run, to create new multi-sports fields, pickleball courts, site the Attleboro Farmers Market there, retrofit the country clubhouse to become a senior center, was rejected on a 4 to 5 person vote. I think that the use for community purposes is more in keeping with why the city moved ahead with purchasing the property. And I agree with Mr. McGann that changing the zoning without a plan being proposed to you is premature and inappropriate. If I want to change how my property is used, I have to come before you with a plan and get a zoning variance. Why is the city saying, oh, let's carve out 5 acres and open it up to an RFP process rather than doing the RFP and then saying, this is a good idea, let's see if we can rezone to get this done. Additionally, thank you for listening to me.
Council Reynolds and Council Angelo.
May I ask you, sir, how long you've lived in the city?
35 years.
35 years. And so have you been up at the park? Have you been able to use it since we bought it for use as a park?
No, I'm out of my house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's close to 7 o'clock by the time I get home from work.
I know that.
So,
were you in favor of us purchasing? So you like the whole idea of having some open land up on this end of town?
Absolutely.
So you agree also with the young people that came up ahead of you as well as that it should remain as it is. Thank you.
Council Angelo.
President Delicio, can I ask who created this committee?
The mayor.
The mayor, yes. It was after it was purchased, 2018, 2019 timeframe, I believe.
That's what I was expecting to hear for the answer. And so the mayor, all right, so that was the mayor's committee, and it was the mayor that is probably asking for this to be rezoned or not?
Definitely.
Okay. That's the rest of my questions. Thank you.
Additional question? All right. Council Waterman.
Did you at any time in that process of coming up with these suggestions, that individual, as a group, that it was going to influence what the city administration did to do down the road? I don't believe the gentleman was on that committee.
I wasn't on the committee.
I'm sorry. And I
read the final report,
Then
that
retract
the
the
committee
question.
drafted.
Thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you for coming down tonight. Do we have anyone else to speak? Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone else to speak neither for nor against?
Mr. President, members of the council, planning board, Jack Jacoby, 15 Prince Street. I'm neither for nor against. I just wanted to answer a couple of questions to make sure there was clarity. I'm the chairman of the Municipal Building Commission, as you know. So a question was asked about the impact on the potential performing arts center. That would be located a good distance away, so it would, proposal would not have an effect on that if this council should choose to pursue that, the building of that. The second thing is that
Council Holmes and Council Reynolds.
I'm sorry, so I thought that that's paved, that parking lot is paved.
it's paved.
There's lighting that's already set up there.
Lighting is temporary.
So we would need to appropriate money for permanent light fixtures there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Council Reynolds.
So, you know, this permanent parking area kind of clouds my mind here, because I am pretty sure, and I would like to look back at the minutes of all of this, I am almost 100% certain that we were told that we were not told it's a temporary tag. It was a temporary, because we were against it. I remember being against it and was told that it was going to be a temporary parking lot and would go back. It was going to be just the way it was once the school was built. So I am not because of you at all, Jack, but that somehow it's turned into something that is permanent, when I know we were told that was temporary.
Council, do we have
Yeah, that question is, I would like to see the original paperwork, and I would like for us to be able to look that up.
I will confirm for you that it was temporary, and it was to be, and the order of the Conservation Commission is that it be returned to its natural status.
Okay.
And that's why I said that the administration's intention is a year from now, when it's turned back to the city, to ask that those restrictions be lifted.
That's a lot, I'm hearing a lot different than what I was assuming was happening here. So again, we would have to approve it becoming permanent.
At least the planning and the Conservation Commission would. Whether the city council would or not, I'll leave that to the city solicitor.
Okay.
But I do want to confirm that that was the intention and that was the order.
For it to go back.
To go back to its
Which is
natural
what we
state.
voted on.
I'm not sure that you voted on it.
Well, I do think
we can find out for sure.
Had questions about it. Okay.
But you are 100% correct, and it would take affirmative action of multiple parties in order to make it stay.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make it clear on those points that, you know, the Performing Arts Center, the rest of Highland, and this parking lot, you know, those are the facts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jacoby. Do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against?
Good evening, honorable members of the City Council, Planning Board. My name is Bill Larson. I live 142 Fairway Drive, so I am in a butter. I'm also a member of the Attleboro School Committee, but I'm not here on that behalf at all. Back when the city invested $3 million to buy just under 100 acres of land, it was my hope that there would be a master plan for what would somebody do with 100 acres of land. I'm very concerned that we're going to do this little by little by little by little, and you know, I have a lot of faith in Mr. Region, but I still think that the city should really try to find a master plan for such a huge piece of property. My concern is that if we do it the little by little fashion, all of a sudden we're going to be left with some of the land that all of a sudden we don't have access to a road to. We might have all of a sudden some land that, I mean, there is land in there that's soft, it's wet. So, I mean, it needs to be handled well. And I guess I think something should be done over there. I'm not going to take a stand as to what that is. I just hope that it's done well. And I agree with Ms. Holmes. I think there should be, it doesn't have to be a master plan cast in stone, but there should be something that you're evaluating each one of the projects with against a grander idea. So I thank you very much for your time.
Vice President Cobus, then Councilor Reynolds.
Hi. You mentioned that you're in a butter to the property, correct?
I am.
And in your opinion, if that were to be rezoned to general business, would that have an impact on your property value?
It would not. We lived there when Highland Country Club was there, running as a country club, and we were just great neighbors with each other.
So if it was rezoned, you don't think that would affect your property value?
Not at all.
Okay, that concludes my questions.
Thank you. Councilor Reynolds.
So more, your concern is more the piecemeal effect, let's take this part, let's do this, maybe we'll do something, maybe we'll put the entrance in the front, so it's the piecemeal effect and not having a real picture of how everything should be.
My real concern was when all of a sudden the first piece that really got identified that
May I follow that up? I know where your home is, so I mean, you're very close to the high school and all of that as well. Would you be not in the least bit opposed to it staying, as was mentioned earlier tonight, it staying as it was, possibly, that being an event type of area that used to be there because it didn't affect your property at the time. But would you have concerns if it was general business and, let's say, a 7-Eleven could go in there?
No, because I think you folks will do something reasonable
That looks
with the property.
like it would fit with, yeah.
Right. I mean, I would find it amazing that you folks put a 7-Eleven in the middle of Highland Park. I am not worried about that at all.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So a little humor there, thank you so much. Thank you.
I only have one other comment, and I thought of it as I was listening to some of the other people speak. And again, I don't have a real opinion whether we move the senior center over there or not. But I would like to share with all of you that I had an opportunity to sit through a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation when the city was trying to decide whether we should build a new high school or we should renovate a 50-year-old high school. Renovating a 50-year-old building to bring it up to code was more expensive than building brand new. And I will leave that as my final thought.
Additional questions for Mr. Lawson? Bill, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.
Okay, sir. Do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Seeing some of the questions, and I think I'm going to keep this open until December 6th.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you please go on to the reading of the second public hearing, please?
Yes, sir. Second public hearing for the proposed amendments to Chapter 17 zoning. To adopt the proposed amendments to Section 17-3.3 prohibited uses, Section 17-11.0 definitions, along with an additional recommended amendment, Section 17-3.57 table of accessory use regulations by inserting the word parking.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Just happened to be meandering by.
Good evening, McDonald Building Commissioner. Thanks for wrapping that last one up. Actually, we've been down this road a while now. It's been, I think, almost a year since the final stuff wrapped up with it that we were trying to get in. So I think at this stage, I think the definition is already in place. And I believe that now it's just there's a tweak of a word in the accessory use part to add parking in with storage and garaging, and then the blurb in there for the very beginning where it's not permitted. So I don't know if there's any questions. I know we've hashed this out many times.
Councilor Reynolds.
So, Bill, we have hashed it out a long time, and I know Kathleen's worked on this a long time, and I had concerns or questions way at the beginning.
Yep.
But this is something that we've had on the books a really long time. The only thing that's changed, really, is Kathleen and you working together to try to find a definition for what doesn't belong in residential. Basically, correct?
Yeah, it was, I don't want to say it was buried in the ordinances, but it wasn't as profound right there. So where it was, like the tweak with the parking portion of that in the accessory uses, but it's always been in there as not accessory use in residential zones, correct. But there was never a definition. So this kind of tied it, the definition was really what we really wanted to get to, but then that kind of triggered to get the other things in place just to round it out.
And this helps you when someone calls and has an issue or whatever, or
You know, without having a definition before, you know, I did my best, and I was going off of DOT definitions, and not everybody agreed with me, and I really couldn't pin it down because we didn't have it, and so now having it will make a difference. Now again, it's not, you know, it's not like I get calls every day for all this, so I don't think it's a big deal. But you know, I know that there are people that have gotten notices in the past, and none of it changes. It was there before and still there now. It's just a little bit more clear.
Thank you. I want to say thank you first, too, for working on it for all this time and trying to make it
well, Kathleen
maybe
did all
stick.
that.
You and Kathleen.
She did all the
She was a pit bull, I know. She was. So thank you so much.
Is that additional questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you,
down,
Bill.
Bill. Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Chairperson Bennett, do you see a reason to keep this open?
I do not.
Okay. And Councilor DeSimone, do you see a reason to keep this?
Do not, thank you.
I declare this public hearing closed. And board, thank you for your service tonight.
Thank you. So Auntie can come back in the room.
Council Holmes, don't forget.
Okay.
Just give him a moment. Just waiting for Councilor Conti to come back. And Councilor-
Seriously?
I hope it was. Yeah, right, that we would do that, yeah, exactly.
You fell asleep.
Okay. Madam Clerk, please read a hearing for the third public hearing.
Yes, sir. Public hearing to for the purpose of setting the tax classification for fiscal year 2023, including discussion on the percentage of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of property.
Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak? Probably for or against it. Anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against?
Good evening,
Good evening.
Councilor, President Delicio. We are here once again to talk about tax classification, fiscal year 2023 tax classification presentation. I chose this photo because I thought it was very cool. It's the new high school. Which results in a percentage shift. The City Council must hold a public hearing before it makes decision on the tax rate options. The assessors provide information on the impact of the various alternatives. So the first is to establish final values for all taxable and real and personal property. Fiscal year 2023 assessments are as of January 1st, 2022, utilizing sales data from the previous calendar year, 2021. In 2021, 1,004 deeds were recorded in the city of Attleboro at the Bristol County Registry of Deeds. From those transfers, the assessor's office inspected and analyzed qualified sales, meaning sales between a willing seller and a willing buyer, as follows. So just to point out, single family, we had 461 sales. The minimum sale price was $170,000. The maximum sale price was $917,000, with an average sale price of $471,845 and a median of $460. Condominium sales were up also 109 of those. $85,000 was the minimum price, $435 was the maximum, with an average of $277,354 and a median of $270. I won't go through every category, but you can see it there. The income approach to value is used in determining commercial and industrial properties with 2 years of sales as support. We do a sampling in an interim year, so we did a sampling of 200 income and expense returns, and no large market changes that from the 2022 assessments were indicated by those samples. The chart on the next page shows the value changes in single-family residential properties and how they correlate to the sales from the previous year. I like this chart just because it shows very clearly the lines are the sales from the previous year, and the bars are the assessments for that fiscal year that it pertains to. So you can see how the assessments follow the sales. The second chart below just shows it's not meant to compare the values of the classes. Obviously, the commercial and industrial values are lower than the residential, but it does show how the uptick of the residential values is greater than the commercial. The commercials are more of a stable, slower increase. So as for assessed values by class, this is the LA4 form from the Department of Revenue Gateway. This basically is a comparison of last year's parcel counts, values, and a percent change from fiscal year 2022 to 2023. I do want to make note that assessment changes are due to new construction in addition to any class code changes that may have been made, and then of course the market adjustments that we make for that. That's basically that. Of course, residential values went up, single families went up, the entire class by 12%. Commercial, again, didn't see as much of an increase. The second thing we need to do is determine the maximum levy amount allowed under Proposition 2.5. A city or town may...
Excuse me, Julie?
Yes?
On the previous slide, you said the commercial didn't see much of an increase. If anything, it looks like it might have decreased. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Determining the maximum levy. The maximum amount a city or town may levy or raise through taxation is limited under Proposition 2.5. The levy limit for each year is equal to the previous year's levy limit plus 2.5% plus new growth. Any approved debt exclusions are then added to calculate the maximum amount allowable levy for a community. So a definition of new growth is anything that's being assessed for the first time. That's considered new growth. The assessed values are converted into tax dollars, and that's what's added to the levy limit. As part of this year's interim adjustment of values, 1,300 building permits were processed and inspected for property data changes. We also made great strides in using our sales verification updates and using Nearmap to validate and update data using those. New growth continues to be primarily in the residential class. We had completion of 84 new homes in the city, and the apartments at 1 Wall Street were the biggest contributors in the residential class. Personal property growth was considerable this year due to addition in utility and telecommunication equipment assets. Mass Electric alone added 12 million in assets, and the telecommunication added 4 million, with about 65,000 in new growth. So, building the levy limit, how did we get there? The fiscal year 2022 levy limit was $82,416,915. You add the statutory 2.5 increase. New growth this year was $1,478,175. And then to that, the debt exclusion on the DE1 this year is $6,799,357, giving you a total allowable levy limit of $92,754,870. That is a 4.6%, 4.66% increase from fiscal year 22 to 23. Apartment buildings for resort communities. Debt exclusion amounts to approximately apartment revenue offers increase due to go on to use a sample residential average single calculator of 402,000, utilizing last year's information with the $9 in tax rate. This equates to a 10% an increase in the residential tax rate was $1.39. The savings to a home valued at $370,000 is $83.24. There are different options that the council increase cost to a $510,000 home was $166.96. The first is a residential exemption, point where there was no exemption that's equal to a maximum of 30 if the home is valued at $389,880. That's the value of all the city of Attleboro's residential class in the city is predominantly owner-occupied, single-family dwellings. This increases the property tax of a parcel even if they qualify for the exemption many times. Mobile home parks, apartments will not qualify for the exemption. They will only see an increase and will likely pass it on to renters. Homeowners may be better served by a personal exemption or a deferral. For these reasons, the residential exemption is not recommended. And there's also a small commercial exemption. This exemption is for Class 3 commercial parcels. They may receive an exemption of any percentage up to 10%, provided that they are occupied as of January 1st by a business with an annual employment of no more than 10 people at all locations. The parcel has a valuation less than $1 million before application of the exemption. This shifts the tax burden within the commercial and industrial classes, not the personal property class. The exemption goes to the owner of the building, regardless if they are the owner of the small business or not. 14 communities in Massachusetts adopted the small commercial exemption. There are approximately 55 parcels out of the 456 commercial that we have that may qualify, and many of those are not owner-occupied businesses. This exemption would increase the tax rate on all commercial and industrial parcels, not personal property. While benefiting approximately 55, many are not owner-occupied, the personal property exemption is likely to benefit more small businesses. The council has voted the maximum $10,000 threshold for personal property, and I do think that that's more beneficial than this would be to small businesses. For these reasons, the small commercial exemption is not recommended. And so, moving on to tax allocation options. So the Department of Revenue calculates a minimum residential factor that's allowed each year to ensure that the residential class pays at least 65% of its full fair cash value share, and that the commercial, industrial, and personal property does not pay more than 150%. Attleboro's minimum residential factor for fiscal year 23 is 0.9106, which allows for a shift of up to 150% to the commercial, industrial, personal property class. I have given some samples here of the shifts, how they affect the share percentages of the levy, how that changes the tax rate and affects a single-family residential tax bill, a median single-family tax bill, an average commercial tax bill, and a median commercial tax bill. I also included 2 charts this year that I thought would illustrate how the shift works. And you can see how shifting to a 1.36, which is what it was last year, that's why I used that number. You can see how it shifts the percentages that are picked up by each class. City of Attleboro's top 10 taxpayers. This list usually has a lot of the same names on it, although the commercial industrial class is a lower share percentage of the full and fair cash values. 9 of the 10 top taxpayers are commercial, industrial, and personal property parcels. They pay about 8% of the total tax levy. And I just included another chart, a graph that shows the breakdown of the commercial, industrial, and personal property assessed values. So you could see where the larger values were within those classes. And then the average tax bills and tax rates. I included all 20 Bristol County communities this year on the chart, and Attleboro falls dead in the middle, number 10, with a single-family tax bill of $5,197, and an average single-family value last year of $359,629. I think Attleboro has been in a middle spot for a long time, and I think they'll probably remain there. The final chart is the historical assessed values. I call it my kitchen sink chart because it's got everything in the kitchen sink in it. It's a 5-year comparison of residential values, median assessments, average assessments, median tax bills, the commercial values, the total values of all classes for the last 5 years, and the percentage changes, the total levies each year, the shifts that were chosen, and how that affected the percentage of levy as it was shifted. And the last 3 pages are the what-if scenarios from the Gateway module. This is just a deeper breakdown of all of the shifts that are available. This isn't even all of the shifts that are available. So if anybody wants to see any number, just let me know. I can run it for you and let you know what the tax rates would be and what the percentages would be at different splits. But I tried to give you more this year so that you could know what your options are. With that, anyone have any questions?
Councilor DeSimone.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I reserve the right to pepper you with a lot more after I've had time. Okay. Number 1, you talked about the residential exemption, which I appreciated because that remains on my mind. I know it may not be appropriate at this time, but my understanding is that during the pandemic, the amount of people buying property as investments increased greatly. Do we know, in fact, how many non-owner-occupied residences there are? Because I understand that people were gobbling up real estate and are renting it out, but do you track that?
So I did, for this, I did, and it was about 95% owner-occupied in single families, and the same, it was 90% in condominiums, and then of course the percentages dropped for 2 families, 3 families. I don't have the exact numbers, but I can get them for you. But
was it an increase? Did we go up from years past, do you know?
I'm not sure about that. This was the first year that I really looked at it. I can go back and run historical reports and let you know that.
Well, that's fine. I accept your opinion that it's not the right moment for that, but again, just based upon trends, right? Is that your understanding as well, that people continue buying properties as investments? So I continue to have that residential in mind. And I know Provincetown did it and carved out an exemption for year-round renters, just an FYI. I think we discussed that last year.
Right, right.
All right, number two, this may be out of your jurisdiction, but I noticed that exempt property values increased by 12%, a healthy amount, to the tune of $74 million. Who is in charge of pilots in the city? Is that the administration who determines pilots?
Generally, those are through the administration. I'm not sure that we have many pilots in the city. It might go through the Economic Development Incentive Board going forward.
Yep.
But I would say that the largest increase in the exempt class was the 95% completion of the high school.
Okay.
So that value was included in that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that
Fair
was a
enough.
large
All right.
increase.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, President Pelosi.
Vice President Kovas.
Thank you. And thank you for coming out. I don't know that we've talked about sort of the policy that we've tried to use, but I wanted to take a minute to ask you if it makes sense. The thing that we tend to look at is the overall levy increase year over year. This year, I think it's going up 4.6%. And then try to match the residential increase to sort of match that so that fluctuations in residential property value are sort of normalized and residents can plan on sort of a consistent increase that is aligned to the levy increase. As a policy in general, do you have thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
I think the policy makes sense, but I think as the residential class is going to continue to grow in Attleboro at a much greater rate than the commercial. So you're going to run out of shift. If you keep trying to increase the shift to keep the residential share at a more steady pace, you're going to run out of shift. You're not going to be able to shift anymore at some point to the commercial. And I don't see any really big commercial projects coming down the line. I see certain buildings being converted from commercial or industrial to residential. So you're losing that out of the commercial, adding it to the residential, you're only building up the residential class more. So it's going to be harder and harder to manage that. And I think you will run out of room at some point with that. You have the debt exclusion in there now that will eventually, years down the road, come back off, and maybe it'll be easier to back off of the shift at that point. But that's my opinion on it. I understand it, and I think it's a good policy to try to have to control things for the residents, but it's not manageable.
For the long term. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for the assessor? We have a question. From a DOR's perspective, what is their thought and vantage point on a split rate?
And I have looked at this because I always look for guidance from Department of Revenue and anything that I can find. There was a study done as part of Chapter 3 of the Acts of 2004, and that's when the real estate market kind of started to boom again, and people were needing to shift more because the residential class was just growing at such a rate, and assessment practices were a little bit different then. That's neither here nor there. They, in that report, really felt that it wasn't proper to continually shift to the commercial and industrial personal property classes, that it actually took away from the standard, the constitutional standard that we are supposed to be assessing to full and fair cash proportional value to each class. And that's what we're taking away by shifting. We're no longer proportionally assessing tax. That was their opinion on that. And they also thought that it was more prudent for communities to try to utilize or increase the availability of exemptions, personal exemptions to people to help them, that would be more of a help. I know the council you've voted to increase the limits on 41C, the income limits. You voted to reduce the interest rates on the deferral and increase those income limits. Increase the number of senior work-offs that are allowed in the city. So I know that's a good policy that you're working towards. Maybe you can look at other ways that you can increase exemptions that way. That was one of the things that they did say in the report. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, other things. But generally speaking, they don't like the policy from what I got.
Thank you. Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. So but that report's 20 years old.
It's 20 years old, but the facts that they use, the opinions that they gave were based on conditions that we're almost seeing again, and we might start seeing again. And I don't think the basis of what they were investigating has changed that much. I can forward you a copy of it. And you can read.
Sure. Yeah, to any of us.
Additional questions? Julie, thanks so much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Julie.
Thank you. Have a good night.
So, do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against?
Good evening. My name's Jack Lank. I live at 18 Lindsay Farm Lane. But I'm here tonight in my role as the president of the United Regional Chamber of Commerce. One thing I'd like to say before I read my statement is I've come up in front of this honorable body numerous times, and over the past few years, you promised that you would lower that difference between the commercial and the residential. As Julie just said, commercial is declining big time in this city. So please, think about that. And the United Regional Chamber has advocated against the dual tax rate for years. This year, we're asking you not to do any shift or put any more burden on the commercial and the business community. A dual tax rate raises no additional money for essential town services, none whatsoever. The total tax levy in any city or town in Massachusetts is set by Proposition 2.5, and the level of the new growth in the city or the town. Unfortunately, the way business is taxed different from the way residents are taxed, which results in a great deal of confusion. Fortunately for us, Julie Hobson has done a fantastic job at explaining the tax classification process and the formulas that are used to determine those findings, and that's in the report that you have in front of you. The current dual tax system is already neither fair nor equitable for the businesses. Businesses must pay towards such items as the city school system, the trash pickup, don't get me going on the trash, which they don't use. They have to pay for their own. Residents have always received a greater value, dollar for dollar, for their tax payments, and still do now. Under a dual tax rate system, because there is a ratio, and I don't have the exact numbers here, and I'd have to ask Julie whether it's 85 or 87% residential and 13% commercial, those would have to ask Ms. Hobson. If you leave the tax rates that they currently are, the homeowners will only see a small increase in their taxes. We would like to see you shorten that levy a little bit more. Almost all of the local professionals, as well as local businesses, have already suffered greatly through this COVID-19 pandemic. Supply chain issues, the increase in cost in goods and services has affected every one of us and everybody sitting in this room. Trying to find enough workers is one of the major challenges that all my members are having right now. Where did all the bodies go? Nobody can figure that out. But if you go into any local business, you'll find fewer choices on their shelves. Some have to have limited hours of operation because they can't find enough workers. And adding additional taxes to that right now, it's just not fair. Businesses and professionals have many costs of doing business. They're invisible to the regular consumer, such as ever-increasing insurance costs for property, errors and omissions, licensing fees, permitting fees, and all that they have in 2022. We all face double-digit health care insurance increases. Minimum wage has gone up. Unemployment insurance increases are through the roof due to the pandemic and all the additional taxes and fees at all levels, city, state, and federal. If you look around the city, you'll still see many underutilized buildings and vacancies that are often long-term in nature. You do not, however, see many houses vacant for long. Houses turn over rather quickly here in Attleboro. An increase in the tax rate is a significant sign to new and existing business in this city that the city of Attleboro is not business-friendly. One of the first questions we get when they call the chamber is, what are the taxes? We cover 16 communities, so I have to give them all that information. It's often one of the first questions that are asked by all new businesses that have come into any one of my communities. The current split tax rate is also an incentive to build more residential homes in the city, where we're seeing many new single-family homes being built already. But it further increases the demands and the burdens on the city resources, such as the schools, the police, the fire, whereas business growth adds to the tax base without utilizing a lot of those already limited services. Overcrowding of the schools is only one of the impacts. Attleboro does not face competition from other in-state communities to attract and retrain their professionals, their businesses, and their retail operations. In fact, many states in the country court our existing businesses, and they offer special incentives for them to relocate there. The state of Rhode Island is actively going after our businesses now, and they're offering tax incentives if they will move over the line into Rhode Island. We can't afford to let that happen. Some 80% of U.S. businesses are considered small business, and over 85% of my members, the United Regional Chamber, have 10 employees or fewer, and many of them are family-run. Because business taxes are basically different from residential taxes, which are based on real estate properties and value, when the value of a business goes down, which it often does because of higher tax rates, the commercial and industrial property tax base itself erodes, resulting in fewer and fewer tax dollars emanating from that business to the city. It's important to note that due to the nature of the commercial tax structure, which is mandated by law, the real value of the very entity that the commercial tax is determined by often then decreases. As Julie has already mentioned, we have lost commercial here in the city. Yet the need for critical municipal services, including the police, the fire, and the schools, is getting stronger and stronger every day. Many area families are employed by these local businesses, and employees suffer when their employer suffers, usually through loss of income or loss of benefits. The vast number of local companies contribute greatly to our local youth and civic programs. Yet when they're struggling to exist, they often can't afford to give generously. And if they're out of business or have moved out of town, they're not here to give anything at all. You know, this city administration has boasted many times now that the city has the highest amount of cash reserves in the history of the city. Assessed real estate values have escalated only because the true worth of residential properties in the city have escalated. Home equity is a real and viable asset to homeowners, and companies doing business in our city should not be penalized because of this. The values of their business have traditionally not gone up in times of a sluggish national marketplace, but rather down. The United Regional Chamber asks that this honorable body vote to change the current tax rate to make it fairer and more equitable for the local businesses and help sustain those businesses and not penalize the existing businesses that we have. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Mr. Lang? Jack, quick question for you. I believe the tax split was implemented late 70s. In your professional opinion, just knowing what you know, your history of the city and understanding the city, what would you say is the biggest difference in the commercial and business environments at that time versus now?
Well, we had companies like Balfour, we had companies like Jostens, that they got incentivized to move down south. You know, lower labor costs, lower taxes. That really hurt the city big time. And there's many of you that were here during that time, whether you sat on the council or you lived here. You know, at one time, for instance, Texas Instruments, they had 6,000 employees here in the city. I think Sensata's down to like 450. We lost everybody from Balfour. We lost everybody from Jostens. and those were big taxpayers in the city. We still have the TI building over there that's half empty. You know, we have the colleges that are in half of the building and a couple of the businesses, but that's a huge property. And unfortunately, whoever allowed this to happen, they stripped that building. And all it is a brick shell. The wiring, the plumbing, everything is gone. So anybody that we've brought in, and I've brought in at least 3 that were interested in that building, when they found out what the cost would be to replace all those and bring it up to code, they said, not me, not gonna go there. So times have changed dramatically since that time. And as Julie mentioned, we don't have any big commercial companies coming in Attleboro, not to my knowledge anyways, and I got a pretty good view of that. I wish we did, because we could certainly use that, but at this point, no.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Lang? Jack, if you wouldn't mind just leaving a copy of what you read?
I will email that to Virginia.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else speak neither for nor against?
Good evening again, honorable members of the City Council and Mr. President. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk. My name is Bill Larson. I live at 142 Fairway Drive. I also own a business at 90 Olive Street. So I'm in one of those very unique situations where I get multiple tax bills. As a child, I was always a visual kind of person. So I'm gonna beg some forgiveness here. So in front of you, there's 2 bottles of water that are basically the same. They're 1-gallon jugs. We'll call this one the residential, and we'll call this one the commercial. They both need city services. So the residents pay $14 and change for their services. And the commercial, for the same services, pays $21. I don't think that's fair. Would you go to the store and purposely buy a bottle of water for $21 when you could buy it for $14? Now, I know it's not going to be even, not in my lifetime. I think we could do a 25% split, and I think that would be, fair. We're always going to pay, commercial's always going to pay more. I got that. That's been drilled into my head loud and clear. But this difference, and these are just numbers that I picked off the city's website this afternoon, I just don't think it's fair. Not to receive the same city services, and I agree with Mr. Lank, I don't think the commercial really pulls the same level of service that the residents do, but just for the sake of argument, let's call it even. It's not even, folks, and I'd ask you to do something about that. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Larson? Bill, thank you. I will not ask you to keep the water bottles for the record, but the video will take care of that.
I need them tomorrow anyhow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
He doesn't have to give them to Virginia like I do?
It's just because it's you, Jack. Do we have anyone else speak neither for nor against? Anyone else speak neither for nor against? Council Conti, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
Thank you. I declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, if you could go on to the reading of the 4th public hearing.
Yes, Mr. President. Public hearing to amend Section 10-13 parking capacity and designation of the ordinances of Attleboro as follows. Section 10-13.1, the municipal parking garage shall lease spaces for 24 parking subject to the discounts in Section 10-8 of this ordinance. 6 of these short-term parking spaces shall be designated handicapped parking.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to speak in favor?
Hello, councilors. Jeremy Stoll, Director of Budget and Administration. I submitted this memo to the mayor, who submitted it to you as new business as part of my charge as the parking administrator. So our parking garage right now on Sanford Street, the structure, we lease out 16 spaces to condos on a 10-year lease, and we sell monthly and quarterly passes. There are also 17 spaces covered off-street that are free 2-hour parking. In addition to that facility, right nearby, we have North Main Street surface lot with 105 spots and Sanford Street surface lot with 130 spots, which we charge 75 cents an hour to park at. Surrounding the Sanford Street garage, there are 2-hour on-street parking and a Bank Street surface lot with 70 spaces, which have 3-hour free parking. As we continue to grow, continue to develop the downtown, and we see an increase for both monthly pass holders and businesses and condos for long-term leases, it seems incongruent to me that we should have 17 off-street covered parking spaces, which are deemed free, when we have surface lots right nearby at 75 cents an hour. So I'm seeking to monetize these 17 spaces in the garage and use these funds for a garage modernization project within the next year. And then those that are paying for the spaces will be those that are benefiting from the use of the modernization project. We have an ongoing parking and mobility study, or a parking and mobility study that's ongoing right now, looking at utilization and some suggestions for improvements to parking writ large in the downtown core. The drafts that I've seen so far are agnostic on this point. So ahead of that, I wanted to offer my suggestion of removing these 17 spaces, still keeping the handicap spaces in the ordinance. These off-street surface lots, the North Main Street and Sanford Street lots, in our data collection for this parking study, have a daytime utilization well below 75% in all the lots. Sanford Street lot has a utilization up to, I believe it's low 90% in the after-hours weekday when folks are using the YMCA on their way home from work. But our capacity to absorb these 17 spots within our existing parking structure, or parking regime is ample. So, concludes my comments.
Councilor Conti.
So I'm not sure how long ago it was. I think it was 2 years ago. We spent either $1 or $2 million renovating the Sanford garage to bring it back up to 100%. You mentioned the need of funds for parking lot modernization. I thought we were there.
No. So I've been here 2.5 years, and that project was complete before. That phase 1, as I understand it, of the project was complete before I was here. We still have phase 2 of the project, which is some crack sealant, some waterproofing, some stairwell improvements, some lighting improvements, things like that. If you go on the first floor of the parking garage while it's raining, you get wet anyway. So that sort of stuff we're looking as a phase 2. And to remind the council, all revenues derived from parking, whether it's off-street meters, fines, or long-term agreements with private entities, are split 50-50 between the parking revolving fund and the general fund. And historically, 100% of these parking improvements have been paid out of the revolving fund.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor DeSimone.
Thank you, President Docio. Jeremy, in regard to the, you say the daytime utilization rate is below 75%. I'm just curious, do you know who is parking there when people do park there? Is it people going to local businesses, or is it people visiting folks in the residences over there?
So by 75%, I meant the surface lots around it, which I said 75% to mean that the
I see what you mean.
surrounding parking lots have capacity to absorb.
All right, let me rephrase. The spots that you want to utilize and make and to lease, do you know how those are being used? Are they being used, those 17 spots, and do we know who's using them?
I have no way to collect that.
All right, fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. Who would you be approaching to see if they have an interest in leasing them?
So I would be able to sell more monthly passes. So right now from the clerk's office, I get a monthly report on how many quarterly and monthly passes are sold for the garage. And right now we're within our capacity. We're not approaching being able to, not butting up against our capacity, but who would I market it to? I've had multiple entities reach out to me who want to develop downtown and are looking for parking spaces to be able to get their permit from the zoning board. And thus far, I've told them I don't have anything available. So nobody in particular right now.
Additional questions for Mr. Stone? Jeremy, you mentioned a report or findings from a parking study. Are you able to get that out to the council?
It's in draft form right now, and it is being prepared by an outside entity, so until it receives both my comments and Catherine Fierick's comments and is in final form, it will 100% absolutely be presented to you all, but right now we're not there yet.
What's the time frame on that coming in, you think?
I got it probably about 3 o'clock today in draft form, so I would say by the time they incorporate all of our comments, maybe a month or so. So it's short term.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Additional questions or comments? Councilor DeSimone, based on the testimony of Mr. Stull, I'd like to keep this open until we get the results of that parking study, so we can just see and kind of have an idea of what it is that we're looking at. Would you be amenable to that?
I shall defer to your preference, yes.
Thank you. We will keep that open until, well, provided there's no one else to speak.
I will just say the study is far more wide-reaching than just this question, just so you're all aware.
Perfect, I appreciate it, though.
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Mr. Lang.
Jack Lang from United Regional Chamber. I have seen that report, and I have to really question the report. First off, we did one just like this probably 3.5 years ago. And just the numbers that were presented to us, there's 3,805 parking spaces in downtown Attleboro, 400 for visitors. Out of that 3,800, could somebody please introduce me to somebody who would park over at the MBTA lot and walk into downtown? Because that's what that study reflects. I think the study that's going to be presented misleads the public, and it's going to mislead this body, because I've read through it. So,
Bless you.
Bless you.
I have sent it forward. Jay, I think you've seen it. So I just think it's very misleading to this body, and it's also very misleading to the public to say that we have that many parking spaces in downtown Attleboro.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lang? Councilor Reynolds.
So Jack, you're saying that there's only 400 really for people that maybe wanted to come into downtown to do business or hang out if there was someplace to hang out. You're not saying that everyone else has got them because they live actually in one of the apartments or something?
No. The original report that was given out.
That was like 3 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's why I'm not on many Christmas card lists, because she went around and counted every private parking space. Okay? Parking space from Mr. Brown, the parking space from Mr. Friedman's property. Okay? Those aren't available to the public.
No.
So why should that be disclosed in that number? That's very misleading.
Very. Thank you. Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, I will continue this until December 6th. Madam Clerk, if you could please read the notice of the next public hearing, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Our fifth public hearing to discuss the adoption of the Designer Selection Procedure Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 7C, Sections 44 through 58, and amend Ordinance Section 2-16, Designer Selection Procedure, in the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro.
Do we have anyone to speak in favor? It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm Municipal Council, Jeremy Stoll, Director of Budget Administration. So this is bringing our ordinance in line with state statute. Right now, our ordinance says we shall have a procedure for the selection of designers for building construction with remodeling or repair with an estimated cost which exceeds $30,000 in terms of design and an estimated construction fee of $100,000. The state law has been updated, and those $10,000 and $100,000 thresholds, actually the $100,000 not even in our ordinance, but the thresholds have been increased to $30,000 and $300,000. So this is a request to bring our ordinances in line with the state statute.
Any questions for the speaker?
I will clarify that it is a design fee of $30,000 and an estimated construction fee of $300,000 or more, not an or. So it needs to trigger both.
All right, Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone else to speak against? Anyone speak neither for nor against? Councilor DeSimone, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing?
I do not.
Thank you very much. I will declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, if you could read this notice for the 6th public hearing.
Yes, sir. Public hearing to discuss the proposed designer selection procedure. The designer selection law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 7C, Sections 44 through 58, requires municipalities and other local public agencies to adopt written designer selection procedures, which must be used when contracting for design services for any project that has an estimated design fee of $30,000 or more and an estimated construction cost of $300,000 or more.
Thank you. Do we have anyone speak in favor?
Last time, I promise. Jeremy Stoll, Director of Budget Administration. So with the ordinance that I just talked about, the second part of our ordinance, so the first part says a procedure shall be established in accordance with the provisions, and no such procedure or amendment to such procedure shall be effective until it is approved by the municipal council following a properly advertised public hearing. So we don't have such a procedure. We don't have a written procedure. We as a designer selection process, typically have designated the Municipal Building Commission as the designer selection committee, and we follow the procedures which were sent down to you as written, but we don't have it codified and we do not have it approved by the municipal council. So what purchasing agent Carol Brown and Molly McLean in my office did was take a template from the Office of the Inspector General, because every municipality has to do something like this. We tweaked it a little bit to make pronouns gender neutral, to make sure it said mayor, to make sure it said city, to put in municipal building commission where it made sense, but the vast majority and the bones of the procedure are best practices from the Office of Inspector General. So I am seeking municipal council approval of this procedure per city ordinance.
Any questions? Councilor Bennett.
I'm sorry I don't have this right in front of me, but with reference to the MBC, can you speak to any of the particulars regarding those powers?
Yeah, so the mayor shall conduct the designer selection process for the city of Attleboro. The mayor may delegate any duties described herein to the extent such delegation is permissible by law, and the mayor shall designate a group of individuals who will conduct the designer selection process. So no member can have any direct or indirect financial interest, cannot be employed by or be a consultant to any applicant, cannot have any negotiating or employment contracting with any applicant, and has no ownership interest in any applicant. So it can be comprised of city employees or folks who have general background in the process. Those are all things that we've been doing as a city, and the Municipal Building Commission has been the entity which has done so, and this puts our practice into writing.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Do you want item 4 where it says it shall be comprised of city employees, or do you want to change that to and/or board and commissioners member? Would there be an instance but you would have both, or no?
I think and/or is probably, yeah, I think, yeah, why would we want to make it either exclusively
point.
city committee? Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, I'll move to amend it in committee. Thank you, President Dosey. I'm sorry.
Additional questions? Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you all.
Do we have anyone else speak in favor? Anyone speak against? Anyone speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, Councilor DeSimone, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not, thank you.
All right, thank you. I declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, if you could read the notice of the 7th public hearing.
Yes, sir. Almost there. Public hearing to discuss the adoption of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 42G-42I and 42K, to enhance the votes from December 17th, 2019 regarding the deferral of taxes and for eligible seniors.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Councilor DeSimone, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing opened?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. We'll declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, if you could go on to the reading of the 8th public hearing.
Public hearing to discuss the restriction of parking to one side of Frank Mossberg Drive.
Thank you. Anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, Council Bennett, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to declare that public hearing closed. And Madam Clerk, if you could go on to the reading of the 9th and final public hearing of the evening.
Public hearing to discuss amending section 10-4.11 of the revised ordinances, isolated stop signs, by adding eastbound drivers on Jefferson Street at 5th Street.
Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Please approach the podium.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Brian French, 131 Melody Drive. I'm not understanding of the reason for this change because it seems like the vast majority of traffic is a throughway going Jefferson to 5th to approach County Street. You already have stop signs on the other two intersections. It seems to me it's clearly defined right away right now. And I think adding that stop sign is going to create more confusion and potentially more accidents.
Do we have any questions for Mr. French? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
I'll be very brief. Bill Larson, Fairway Drive, Attleboro. I've been going through that intersection for the last 20 years. I don't ever recall seeing an accident, so my curiosity was up as to why this is even before you. I didn't know if anyone can even answer that question.
I'm happy
I
to
think
speak to it a little bit.
I think it's a poor place to put a stop sign, but I'd love to know why
Yeah, it's sort of a
we're even
bizarre.
having a discussion.
I'll recognize
absolutely.
Council Bennett.
It's a bizarre intersection. My understanding is that some of the residents on the other side of the intersection, away from the high school, were complaining of some folks speeding up through that intersection, and it creating dangerous conditions. So thinking a stop sign would be a good control to reduce speed through there.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
My only other comment is with people parking on that east side of Jefferson, it would be very difficult for people that aren't familiar with the area to even see the stop sign until they're all of a sudden on it, potentially in the middle of an intersection. I understand the neighbor's concern, absolutely, but I think it's a poor place to put a stop sign. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Lawson? All right.
I'm going home, I promise.
Famous last words. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone speak neither for nor against? Council Bennett, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not. Thank
I would
you.
declare that public hearing closed, and I would entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are in recess until 9:35.
That's you.
This meeting of the Municipal Council back to order at 9:35. I would entertain a motion to go into Committee of the Whole.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are now in Committee of the Whole. If anyone would wish to address the council, please approach the podium. Peter, do you mind closing that door? Thanks.
Good evening, Jack Lank, as a citizen of Attleboro this time. I'd like to challenge something that's in your rules, policies, procedures, whatever you call that, right? When anybody comes up to this podium, they're restricted to address anybody in particular, and you have to keep saying the administration. Well, that's not fair, because we've got some great employees in the city, and they fall under that administration, and we have a few that are not so great. But it's okay for a particular individual to call you out by name on social media, look up your voting record, and make that public. That comes from the administration. Why is that fair?
It's not.
No, it's not. So why can't I, as a citizen, address anybody in particular, whether they're sitting in this room or they happen to sit upstairs? Yet, that person can call you out by name, and he's called out almost each and every one of you by name, but we're not allowed to do that. I'd like to see that changed.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Lank? Jack, thank you for raising this. I think what we'll do is we'll take this back as we have with other suggestions from the residents, and we'll have it put into a committee for it to be addressed.
And one other thing that I'd like to add to that, why is it legal when a solicitation is made to be on any of these committees that you must be a Democrat? City politics are supposed to be nonpartisan.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Councilor Reynolds.
Did somebody literally say that?
On Facebook, in writing.
I'm constantly baffled by the foolishness of it all. Thank you, Jack.
What commission are you referring to that says that you have to be, because I know that there's certain commissions where you have one Republican, one Democrat. Is there a particular commission that you're referring to?
I'd have to go back and look at what the particular one that it was said for. But again, city politics is supposed to be nonpartisan.
No. Well, no, what I'm saying is there are certain commissions where you have one representative from the Republican Party and one from the Democrat Party. That may be what you saw. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that they are nonpartisan, and there are commissions that do have one representative from each party.
I agree.
So if the Republican is still on the commission and the Democrat leaves, moves, dies, whatever, they'll put out, we need a Democrat for this particular position because there's already a Republican.
That's a possibility.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to argue with you, I'm just saying that might be the case, because there are some.
I agree.
Councilor Angelo, then Councilor Blair.
President Delicio, can we ask for, like, information or wording on that, or can we ask for it to see that?
Well, I appreciate this being raised. I don't know that there's much we can do on this body in terms of that particular piece. I think we can investigate, especially if you said it was public. If you have something that you'd like to send to the council through Virginia, I think that would probably be the best way to approach it at this point. Councilor Blair, then Councilor DeSimone, do you have more of a point of order?
Yeah.
Or?
No. I appreciate Jack's point. I'm not a big social media person myself, but I will say in terms of naming names, didn't something just happen in Taunton where somebody got called out, they called out a public official by name, and it turned into a big kerfuffle. I would be hesitant to go down a road of where we're standing there impugning somebody in a public body. I'm just worried about where it could go. I think, I take Jack at his word that happened, but what about someone else comes up and just says something? You know what I mean? So I think it's something we really need to consider as a practice.
No, I agree. I don't disagree. I think, but I think it's certainly worthy of this body having a conversation around that and investigating it. Councilor Blair?
To my knowledge, the only committee that's the commission, the election commission, is the only one that requires equal representation
one did you
whether
say?
it be Democrat, Republican,
The liquor board.
I believe.
In the clerk just informed me that also the liquor board.
Liquor board?
Yeah.
Right, correct.
Council Conti.
Being the member of two cities, and Taunton being mentioned, the council has the ability to set its own policy, which is what Mr. Lank is saying. In the case of Taunton, what happened was a member of the public at the committee of the whole addressed a particular counselor who is a funeral director about the taxation on his building. And the person was quieted by the mayor, and the council then voted to suspend all committee of the whole till further notice. Therefore, no member from the public could address any issue of any matter before the council. This has been going on for 3 weeks, and they're getting away with it. So I think there's merit to what Mr. Lank is requesting, and I can't advise you on how to address it, other than I think approaching the city solicitor as a first step might be in order. And that concludes my comments.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Council Conti. And one thing I will say, as long as I'm sitting in this chair, we will never suspend committee of the whole.
Stranger things have happened.
That's the name of a show.
The truth.
Rick, we've been around too long.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any other questions, comments, concerns for Mr. Lank? Okay. Jack, thank you. We'll take this under advisement.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay. I would entertain.
It's some kind of.
I'm seeing anything, George?
Oh, yeah.
Seeing it's just George, I would entertain a motion to arise
Second.
from committee of the whole.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have arisen from committee of the whole. We'll now go into a reading of the mayor's communication. And Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mr. President, October 18th, 2022. Dear municipal councilors, I respectfully submit a communication from Chief of Police Kyle P. Hegney regarding the need to surplus the following .45 caliber firearms to be used for trade-in value. Therefore, I respectfully request your honorable body to surplus the items below.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Council on Aging, Melissa Tucker, regarding the receipt of an earmark grant from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs in the amount of approximately $125,000. This is a legislative earmark for the feasibility study for a new senior center facility. Funds must be expended no later than June 30th, 2023. In accordance with Chapter 1, Section 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body approve expending such funds in any future amendments.
Finance Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Council on Aging, Melissa Tucker, regarding the need for funds for an elevator repair that is required by the state by December 31st, 2022. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $6,945 from account 1124-1000-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 154-11000-524011 Council on Aging, Maintenance of Buildings, copies in your packets.
Finance, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Veteran Services Ben Quell regarding the donation of Stop and Shop gift cards totaling $500 from disabled American veterans. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro, copies in your packets.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit a communication for Budget and Administration Jeremy Stowe regarding the need for funds in order to fund a 10-week overlap of 2 individuals in a single position in the assessor's office due to a pending retirement. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $3,000 from account 1124-1000-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 114-11000-511000 Assessor's salaries, copies in your packet.
Finance Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Police Chief Kyle P. Hegney regarding the receipt of approximately $12,620 from the fiscal year 2022 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant through the New Bedford Police Department and the U.S. Department of Justice. No match is required by the City of Attleboro, and funds must be expended no later than September 30th, 2025. In accordance with Chapter 1, Section 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to accept this grant and approve expending of such funds and any future grant amendments by the Attleboro Police Department. Copies in your packet.
Public Safety and Emergency Management, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Attleboro Public Schools Director of Finance, Mark Furtado, regarding the following fiscal year 2022 fiscal obligations that were not received in time to be processed in the normal fiscal year 22 business cycle.
Finance Committee, please.
Thank you. Therefore,
And Madam Clerk, are there any additional communications tonight?
yes, sir. The Attleboro City Clerk's communication is quite full. We received a Class 2 license renewal application from Tri-Town Auto Sales at 1850 County Street for 4 customer parking spaces and 5 display spaces.
License Committee.
We received a Class 3 license renewal application from Tri-County Auto Sales at 1850 County Street for customer parking spaces and 6 display spaces.
License Committee.
We received a letter from Charles Oliver of 11 Thayer Farm Road urging the City Council to table the vote of rezoning Highland Park until the feasibility of a Highland Park solution for the Council on Aging has been thoroughly vetted.
Zoning and Land Use, please.
We received a letter from Joseph Parent, 31 Karen Street, regarding hazards on Lower County Street and questions about COVID testing on sewerage and questions with regards to the reconstruction of Lindsay Street.
Traffic and Transportation, and Council Bennett, would you like to refer that to traffic study?
A portion of this, it looks like there's a couple of different items.
Yeah, I think referring to traffic study, you can kind of amend it and bring it back.
Okay, thank you.
For
Will do.
discussion. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
We received a Class 1 license renewal application from Courtesy Auto Group, Inc., doing business as Courtesy Kia Mitsubishi, 11 and 16 Scott Street, for 32 customer parking spaces and 172 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We received a Class 2 license renewal application from C&A Millennium Motors Incorporated, 1844 County Street, for 10 customer parking spaces and 8 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
Received a letter from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, in support of banning the selling of live animals in pet stores.
Copies to all councilors, please.
We received a Class 2 license renewal application from Bristol County Auto Sales, Inc., 227 Pine Street, for 10 customer parking spaces and 10 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We received a Class 2 renewal license application from East Coast Auto Sales, Inc., 24 Rice Street, for 14 customer parking spaces and 40 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We received a Class 2 renewal license application from Your Mechanic, Inc., doing business as Better Auto, 473 Washington Street, with 10 customer parking spaces and 4 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
Excuse me. We received a Class 2 license renewal license application from North Main Street Auto Division of K&L Tire and Automotive Company, Inc., 44 North Main Street, with 17 customer parking spaces and 1 display space.
License Committee, please.
Received a letter from Kimberly Allard, 12 Slater Street, in support of providing an exemption for contracted vehicles in specific tow trucks.
Ordinance of Elections, Legislative Matters, please.
We received a Class 2 license renewal application from Blue and White Motors, Inc., 1815 County Street, with 4 customer parking spaces and 15 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We received a letter from Jacob Allard, 12 Slater Street, in support of bringing on called tow trucks to park at home when on call.
Ordinances, Elections, Legislative Matters, please.
That concludes the clerk's communication, sir.
Thank you. We'll now go on to committee reports, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
The License Committee does not have any business this evening. We'll move to the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Waterman. Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. Reporting for Public Works Committee, I have one item from the docket of October 18, 2022. I move to authorize the Park and Forestry Department to pay FY22 invoices to Amazon Business in the amounts of $29.56, $30.97, and $174.98.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Councilor Blair. Motion is in order. Any comments?
None. We discussed it in committee, just to pay a couple bills.
Okay. We'll have roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays. I can't remember last time I had all 11 of you here.
Thank you, motion passes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies. That's all the business I have for Public Works Committee, and look forward to a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Dolan. Councilor Conti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reporting for the Finance Committee, I have 5 motions to bring before the council this evening. The first from the docket of October 18, 2022. I move to transfer $5,000 from the citywide reserve fund for transfer account to the health in-state travel account to reimburse city employees.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order.
This is contractual, and I would encourage the support. And that concludes my comments.
This requires a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. From the docket of October 18, 2022, I move to transfer $136.43 from the health vaccinations account to the health bill previous year account to pay an invoice from fiscal year 22.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
This is common at this time of the year, as some bills did not get submitted by the end of the fiscal year, and that concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll have roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. From the docket of October 18, 2022, I move to rescind the intergovernmental state and county assessment org 1980100 in the amount of $6,389,250 within council vote number 12 of June 21st, 2022, and replace it with state and county assessments org 1980100 in the amount of $6,437,916.
Second.
Thank you. Is there a second piece to that, Councilor Conti?
Oh.
Additionally, I move to appropriate $27,185 to the school buildings maintenance building supplies account.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
Yes, this is a result of the final supplemental budget for the county that wound up with the city coming up with more monies, the surplus of which we put into the school building supplies. And that concludes my comments.
Additional questions, comments, concerns from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. From the docket of October 18, 2022, I move to appropriate the following. To the school's buildings maintenance account, $210,542.36. To the citywide reserve fund for transfer account, $132,632.64. And to the DPW paving account,
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
yes, this is a result of certifying the new growth at $1,478,175, and that's $678,000 plus above the forecast. So this is wounding up as additional free cash that the mayor has distributed among the three accounts. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Mr. Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes the business the Finance Committee has to bring before the council this evening. We look forward to a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Conti. Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reporting for Transportation and Traffic Committee this evening. 2 items for the council. From the docket of April 19th, 2022, I move to approve the following ordinance change in Section 10-5 parking. 10-5.2A, prohibited on certain streets as it pertains to the reopening of Rathbun Willard Drive from Thatcher Street to Rome Boulevard, to delete Rathbun Willard Drive easterly and westerly from 570 feet northerly of Thatcher Street to 720 feet northerly of Thatcher Street, and insert Rathbun Willard Drive entirely easterly side northerly from Thatcher Street to Rome Boulevard, Rathbun Willard Drive westerly side from Thatcher Street 430 feet northerly and westerly side 1,400 feet northerly of Thatcher Street to Rome Boulevard.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Just as a reminder to the council, we've, since the very lively discussion a few weeks back, we've received the current and projected parking inventories for the high school as well as the surrounding school areas from Mr. Jack Jacoby, the chair of the MBC. We've also received input from all of our public safety officials, from Chief Hagney, Chief of Police, as well as the Chief of the Fire Department, Chief LaChance, saying that this is in the best interest of safety and concerns us particularly along where the new high school is and how narrow that roadway is for the fire engine to be able to get through. So I think that this is a good improvement. I think we've answered all the questions that the councilors raised, but of course, if there are any lingering questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. Any additional questions, comments, concerns from the council? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes.
From the docket of December 3rd, 2019, I move to strike the following from the docket of December 3rd, 2019. A communication from the Traffic Study Commission recommending delay in opening Rathbun Willard Drive through traffic until a traffic light is installed at Thatcher and Rathbun Willard.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, I think this was discussed in detail in committee. Just to note that this has essentially been mooted and the street is open. Thanks.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, this requires a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes the business of transportation and traffic for this evening. Look forward to a meeting at the next appropriate time.
IT and Infrastructure Committee doesn't have a business tonight. Call for committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. And Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. Reporting for zoning and land use this evening, I have 2 motions. From the docket of September 20th, 2022, I move to approve a portion of Road Street as a public way and accept said way and any related drainage, water, or sewer facility easement, or easements.
Second.
We'll wait for reading. Thank you. Motion is in order.
We just discussed this in committee.
Okay. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds? Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of September 20th, 2022, I entertain a motion to approve the layout of Steeplechase Circle as a public way and accept said way and any related drainage, water, or sewer facilities or easements, all shown on a plan and profile entitled Street Acceptance Plan of Street Steeplechase Circle.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments? Okay. We'll have roll call vote beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
That concludes the business, and I'll call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Holmes. Councilor Reynolds.
Reporting for City Property and Claims Committee, I have 4 motions this evening. From the docket of October 18th, 2022, I move to accept the $10,000 TDI cohort project grant through Mass Development from the Attleboro Art Museum to the city for downtown revitalization.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, I have none.
Additional questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of October 18th, 2022, I move to transfer $800 from account library maintenance of equipment to account library bill previous year to pay a previous year's invoice.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments?
I have none.
Additional questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of October 18th, 2022, I move to declare the following chair from the Economic Development Office as surplus and available for disposition. It's one black fabric office chair.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, I have none.
Additional questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of October 4th, 2022, I entertain a motion to hold a public hearing on November 1st, 2022, in accordance with Section 2-11.2 of the city ordinances, to declare that the Finberg School property be available for disposition.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, I have none.
Additional questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
That is all the business for city property and claims this evening, but I would like to call a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds. Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. Personnel, reporting for Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee. I have one motion from the docket of October 18th, 2022. I move to accept a generous donation of a 3x5 POW MIA flag by the Rolling Thunder, Massachusetts chapter, to the city of Attleboro.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir.
We'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
That concludes the Business of Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee, and I call for a meeting at the next available time, appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Angelo. Councilor DeSimone.
Thank you. Reporting for ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. I have 2 items of business for this evening from the docket of September 20th, 2022. I move to approve the following amendment to Section 9 of the revised ordinances, and I read it in full last in the
We
committee.
will waive that.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments?
None. For me.
Additional questions, comments from the council on this? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. And next up, from the docket of September 6, 2022, I move to amend Section 2-19 Economic Development Board by changing Chairman of the Municipal Council's Committee on Capital Improvements and City Development to Chair of the Finance Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
My only comment is that's a Scrivener's error. It's already been amended from Chairman of the Finance Committee to Chair.
Good. Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Public Safety Committee, I have one motion this evening. From the docket of October 18th, 2022, I entertain a motion to appropriate $413,753 to account 1124100-578370, citywide reserve for opioid settlement. This amount is equal to an anticipated amount to be received and accounted for in our local receipts budget for FY 2023. Funds only.
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Cobus. Motion is in order. Any comments, Council Blair?
No, I think Jeremy explained it well tonight, much better than I could have. And I appreciate him, coming to the podium.
Absolutely. Councilor
Yeah,
DeSimone.
I have a quick comment. So, first of all, kudos to the Commonwealth for negotiating these settlements, because I think it's going to bring about $1.9 million to Attleboro when all is done. And my hope is, my understanding is that these funds will be used to address issues related to the opioid epidemic. And I'm hoping that Chief Hegney plays a large part in the distribution and the way that those funds are used for that purpose, because I know that he likely needs resources to address some of the lingering issues from the opioid epidemic. So I appreciate the funds.
I think that's the intent of this, is to allow him to probably bring on some staff or whatever resources he needs to address it, because as we all know, this opioid epidemic in this country is going nowhere but up.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote. Begin with Councilor Blair.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds? Yes. Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. I have no other business this evening to bring forward. I look forward to a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. There is no old business. There's one piece of new business for which I will recognize Vice President Cobus.
Thank you. I move to have the following new business assigned for study and recommendation, that the committee of the whole be moved to after the public hearings during regular meetings.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
This is, we had discussed this just to move up committee of the whole, so it's earlier, so people aren't waiting till the end of the meeting.
Before I recognize Councilor DeSimone, Councilor Conti is a co-sponsor along with myself and Councilor Vice President Cobus. Anything you'd like to add, Councilor?
This just makes sense. I think that in addition to having it follow the public hearings, that there should also be a time limit be assigned, and we can do that as this matures going forward.
Sure.
And that concludes my comments.
All right, thank you. Councilor DeSimone.
Thank you. It makes perfect sense, and it makes me wonder why we didn't do it before. You know what I mean? It makes no sense to make the public wait until the end of the meeting to comment, so thank you for the business.
Yeah, I agree. Think about it. If we didn't have this, if we didn't suspend the rules, take committee of the whole, we'd be waiting until after 9 public hearings, the communications. It's a long night, so. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll put that in ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are opposed. We are adjourned at 10:09. Thank you, everyone.